Chapter 544. Does that prove it? Yun Qingyue said, "We still have time before the deadline, but the negotiation has not concluded yet. We need to leave time for each sect to prepare, so we have to be quick about it." Saying so, not only did she not slow down, she even accelerated a little. Seeing this, Wu Jun had no choice but to follow suit. After speeding all the way, Skysword Peak began to peek out in the distance. Suddenly Wu Jun spoke, "Actually, we can try to send a ghost cultivator to assassinate him. If we can kill him, all our troubles will be solved." But what if it fails? If they failed, it would only enrage Yi further, and the consequences would be unpredictable. In fact, the Divine Ocean Realm experts did consider dispatching highly skilled ghost cultivators, but the risk was too great. Without even mentioning anything else, Yi was proficient in the way of wards, and even if he was only making a temporary stop at Skysword Peak, he must have set up alarm wards in his vicinity, so the ghost cultivators may not be able to sneak up to him without being caught. Once they were discovered, then with Yi's domineering strength, things definitely wouldn't end well for the ghost cultivators. It was for these concerns that the Thousand Demon Ridge didn't dare to act rashly and instead sent Wu Jun and Yun Qingyue to negotiate with him. Arriving above Skysword Peak, the two swept their eyes around the area and found a figure sitting at the top of the Spirit Peak. "Over there," Yun Qingyue said, then descended her flight-type artifact towards the ground while Wu Jun followed closely behind. In a moment, the two landed about a few dozen meters away from Lu Yi. When they saw him, they were both inwardly surprised as they saw no traces of purple lightning lingering around Lu Ye's body. Based on the information they had received before, the purple lightning coiling around Lu Ye's body should have become almost palpable in appearance after breaking into the New Moon Sect's outpost and killing over 50 cultivators. But when he appeared in the Clouded Sun Clan's outpost less than half a day later, that lightning had already disappeared without a trace, only reappearing again once he took another life. But now it was gone again. This undoubtedly indicated that Yi indeed possessed the means to suppress the judgment of the heavens, but could such a miraculous method truly exist in this world? While they were observing Lu Yi, the latter, who was immersed in his book, also looked up at them, and he was instantly attracted by Yun Qingyue's appearance. To have been known as a heavenly beauty to the men of her generation, she was naturally a great beauty, and beautiful things could always lift a person's mood. When his gaze shifted downwards, his eyes lit up even more. This slight movement naturally did not escape Yun Qingyue's sharp eyes, but she was helpless. This brat was indeed as the rumor suggested. Fortunately, he looked at her without any lecherous intentions in his gaze, and he quickly averted his eyes. Lu Yi glanced at Wu Jun as well, but he didn't pay much attention to him. What he could ascertain was the fact that neither were in the Spirit Creek realm, nor the Cloud River realm. At the very least, they would be real Lake Realm cultivators, but it was highly unlikely for them to be in the Divine Ocean realm. What did puzzle Lu Yi slightly, however, was the woman's age. From her appearance alone, she didn't seem older than himself. But for someone with cultivation in at least the real Lake Realm, how could she be so young? For her to have such an ambiguous appearance, one could only say that the woman preserved her beauty well. "Are you cultivator Yi of the Crimson Blood sect?" Yun Qingyue was the first to speak. This young man before them was the only person in history to have caused such turmoil in the Spirit Creek battlefield with his own strength and left the Thousand Demon Ridge completely helpless. Despite her cultivation level surpassing Lu Yi by far, Yun Qingyue had no intention of underestimating him. Besides, she had a gentle character to begin with. They had seen Lu Ye's portrait before coming here, which matched the person before them, but she still needed to confirm it. Not only did she have an enchanting appearance, even her voice was soft and pleasant as a passing spring breeze. To address Lu Yi as a fellow cultivator, as a real Lake Realm cultivator, was enough to show her full sincerity. Given her cultivation level and status, she could easily address Lu Yi as little friend, or simply by name. One and the same. Lu Yi put away the book in his hand. In his mind, he was speculating the Thousand Demon Ridge's intentions in sending this woman here. He quickly concluded that these two had not come to deliver the peace offerings. "What evidence do you have to prove that you're Yi?" Wu Jun suddenly spoke. Before coming here, he had discussed with Yun Qingyue that one of them would play the villain and the other the reasonable negotiator, which was common during negotiations. That was also the reason why the Thousand Demon Ridge sent two people. If both were easy to talk to, then what was the point of negotiating? That was why someone had to be there to play the tough character so as to highlight the sincerity of the other person, which would make it easier to bargain during negotiations. Wu Jun had no personal malice towards Lu Yi, and the difference in their cultivation levels was evident, but as a cultivator from the Thousand Demon Ridge faction, Lu Ye's actions naturally made him somewhat resentful for his allies, and so he would naturally not be courteous with him. What proof do you want? Lu Ye didn't believe that these two hadn't seen his portrait before coming here. Wu Jun said, I heard that Yi has a little white beast by his side that's always with him, but I don't seem to be seeing it around. It's not here. Yi had to send Tao Jinyu back to the outpost, so Amber had to accompany them. Both spirit and mutant were a linked pair and couldn't stray too far from each other. A Cloud River Realm cultivator should be subject to the judgment of the heavens after invading the Spirit Creek battlefield and killing others, but I don't see any traces of it on you. How can you prove that you're Yi? Wu Jun was adamant. No matter what, he had to assert his authority and let Yi know that the Thousand Demon Ridge was no easy target. Most importantly, Wu Jun wanted to know how Lu Yi managed to suppress the judgment of the heavens. It would be worth any price to find that information out. The inviolable saber was unsheathed. Then bright glints emerged before three crescent-shaped saber lights were swept in Wu Jun's direction. Wu Jun never expected that Lu Yi would actually attack him. When he saw the three saber lights coming at him, his expression changed, and he immediately circulated his spiritual power and vitality to protect himself. He was a body-tempering cultivator, and a real Lake Realm body-tempering cultivator at that, who was past the stage of relying on spirit artifacts for defense. His own physical body was the strongest protection he could have. Do. Following three muffled sounds, the aura around Wu Jun's body flickered, and he was forced back several steps before stabilizing himself. His face immediately turned serious. Even Yun Qingyue, who was watching from the side, revealed a look of surprise. It was then that she realized that the rumors were indeed true, and Yi's strength was as domineering as was said to be. The three saber lights she saw had exceeded her understanding of what a Spirit Creek Realm cultivator was capable of. Now, is that enough evidence? Lu Yi silently put away his blade. Wu Jun was silent, his heart filled with shock. Even though it was just three saber lights, it allowed him to glimpse the extent of his strength. If they were to fight to the death here, then based on his current strength, he wouldn't last more than 3 moves against Yi. The young were truly a force to be reckoned with. Please rest your anger, Cultivator Lu. Senior Brother Wu and I truly haven't met you before. We came here today for an important matter, and Senior Brother Wu is just being cautious. There is no ill will behind it. She bowed gracefully to Lu Yi. Yun Qingyue from Snow Feather Clan greets Cultivator Lu. Wu Jun reluctantly cupped his fist and grumbled, Wind Cloud Mansion Wu Jun. Lu Yi had seen both the Snow Feather Clan and Wind Cloud Mansion on the 10-point map before, and both were first-tier sects. One was from Leizhou while the other was from Yuzhou, all information that was labeled on the map. Lu Yi nodded slightly and returned the greeting. Crimson Blood Sect, Lu Yi. Despite being from different factions, they were still experts in the real Lake Realm or above, so it was only appropriate to show respect. What have the two of you come for? It doesn't seem like you are here to deliver something, Lu Yi asked, cutting straight to the point. Yun Qingyue explained, to be frank, the Divine Ocean Realm Masters are still discussing whether or not they should agree to your demands. After all, such a thing has happened once before, and our Thousand Demon Ridge was agreed to compromise then in hopes that you would not return to the Spirit Creek battlefield after you left. Unexpectedly, after just a few months, the same situation has repeated itself, so the Divine Ocean Realm Masters are finding this situation difficult to accept. Mainly, they didn't expect Lu Yi to continue killing recklessly in the Spirit Creek battlefield even after advancing into the Cloud River realm. Normally, higher-level cultivators would be constrained when invading the Spirit Creek battlefield, but Lu Yi seemed to act without any fear. Senior Brother Wu and I were entrusted by the many Divine Ocean Realm Masters to come here and discuss a mutually acceptable solution with you. Lu Yi kept his gaze fixed on Yun Qingyue, who faced him with an amiable smile. How do you propose we discuss this? Yun Qingyue answered, regardless of what happened, Cultivator Lu can be considered to have bullied the weak in your actions this time. There are rules on the battlefield, and forcibly invading into the Spirit Creek battlefield with your Cloud River realm level of cultivation and destroying the Thousand Demon Ridge's outposts is indeed inappropriate. If all the cultivators from the major factions were to act like this, would the Spirit Creek battlefield not then descend into chaos? What do you think? Who else under the heavens has the ability to do what I did? Yun Qingyue instantly fell silent. That was exactly the question that stumped the Thousand Demon Ridge. Without an answer to this question, they would never be qualified to negotiate with Lu Yi on equal terms. If anyone from Thousand Demon Ridge wants to emulate me, they are welcome to do so without any reservations. I have the ability, so I set the rules. Those without the ability should obediently follow. As for bullying the weak, in terms of age, most of the core circle cultivators are older than me. In terms of cultivation level, the heavens have suppressed my cultivation level at Heaven 9, which means that is all the power I can exert. So, where does this bullying of the weak come from? Yun Qingyue felt helpless at his questioning. What you say is true, but your demands are indeed too harsh. Your demands bled out the various sects in the Thousand Demon Ridge last time, and they will not agree to such a thing again. The Divine Ocean Realm Masters have already reached a consensus on this matter. I know you suffered greatly in the Carnage Coliseum and incurred huge losses, so it's understandable that you expect such compensation. However, you have already destroyed 2 outposts and killed many people. Is that not enough to ease your anger? Lu Yi gazed indifferently at her star-like eyes. If Cultivator Yun is here to talk nonsense, there's no need to say more. I will only be waiting here until the end of the 10-day deadline. Chapter 545, Choice of the Masters. On Skysword Peak, Yun Qingyue wanted to try and persuade Lu Yi further, but he raised his hand to stop her. I've stated my conditions, whether you agree or not is your business. There's no need to discuss anything with me. Wu Jun stepped forward and said sternly, if we don't agree, what then? Do you really have the guts to destroy all of the Thousand Demon Ridge's outposts? You think I don't? Lu Yi turned his gaze to Wu Jun. I believe that Cultivator Lu does have the capability. Wu Jun stared back at him, unflinching. Considering what happened a few months ago with so many of the Thousand Demon Ridge's core circle outposts being destroyed and so many cultivators being killed, Lu Yi did indeed have the ability. However, having the ability didn't necessarily mean he would do it. If he really did, it wouldn't bode well for the Grand Sky Coalition either, and when that happened, the entire Spirit Creek battlefield would descend into chaos. If Yi was at all rational, he wouldn't make such a reckless move. You're right. It is indeed impractical to destroy all the outposts. Lu Ye's tone changed and he spoke with a thoughtful expression. But among so many core circle outposts, picking out 3, 5, or even 10 sects shouldn't affect much. Let's start with the Snow Feather Clan and the Wind Cloud Mansion. What do you both think? Did we challenge you? Both Yun Qingyue and Wu Jun's expressions changed. If Lu Yi really acted as he said, the Thousand Demon Ridge really wouldn't have a good way to deal with it. Compared to the number of core circle sects in the Thousand Demon Ridge, 3 or even 10 weren't many. As Lu Yi said, even if they were occupied, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. He had already done something similar just a few months ago where he captured nearly 30 outposts. If he were to attack again, who knew which outpost he would capture? Until this matter was resolved, every sect in the core circle would be living anxious lives as if a blade was hanging over their necks. Nobody could ensure that their outposts would remain safe from Ye's tyranny. If it so happened that Yi paid them a visit, one would undoubtedly be willing to pay a price in exchange for the safety of their outpost. As for Lu Ye's statement about starting with the Snow Feather Clan and the Wind Cloud Mansion, it was a clear threat. Yun Qingyue and Wu Jun couldn't be unaware of it. Yun Qingyue felt helpless. It seemed that her intervention did not bring about any special effect in the slightest. Though this young man had taken an extra glance at her when they first met, it didn't earn her any special treatment. How could someone so young be so difficult to deal with? She quickly spoke again. Please rest your anger, Cultivator Lu. Senior Brother Wu and I came here in order to discuss and find a solution that can satisfy everyone. How about this? The Thousand Demon Ridge is willing to provide resources worth 3 million contribution points. If you agree, I can have someone deliver it at once. 3 million contribution points worth of resources, even when calculated based on the purchase price of goods from the Vault of Providence, was still a sizable amount. It was enough to sustain any cultivator for a lifetime. Though Cloud River Realm cultivators could accumulate more contribution points than Spirit Creek Realm cultivators, most of them would have only a few thousand to tens of thousands of contribution points, so the terrifying number of 3 million contribution points would undoubtedly make any Cloud River Realm cultivator so excited that they could hardly breathe. Lu Yi, however, remained calm. He had received resources worth 20 to 30 million contribution points from the Thousand Demon Ridge last time, so what was a mere 3 million? It was almost a tenfold difference. The Thousand Demon Ridge's offer today was like throwing scraps to a beggar. Though his demands seemed unjust, it had always been a common tactic for 2 major factions to weaken the enemy's resources while strengthening their own, something which anyone would be happy to see. Furthermore, there were reasons to justify his demands. Lu Yi didn't speak and Yun Qingyue didn't either. They both waited silently. Instead, Wu Jun continued to play his role and said sternly, "Cultivator Lu, offering resources worth 3 million contribution points is already the greatest sincerity that the Thousand Demon Ridge can show. One should not be too greedy." Cultivator Yun. Lu Yi ignored Wu Jun and called out to Yun Qingyue softly. Yun Qingyue immediately showed an attentive attitude. "Please speak, Cultivator Lu. If the Thousand Demon Ridge is troubled by my demands, we can invalidate my previous proposal. Resources are convenient, so just give me something worth 300,000 contribution points." Rather than show a happy expression, Yun Qingyue's expression became much more serious. Does Cultivator Lu still have any other conditions? The sudden change in Lu Ye's stance indicated that something was waiting for her. "Give me another golden body token, and we'll consider the matter settled." Certainly it was true that more than one golden body token existed in the world. Lu Yi obtained one in the Carnage Coliseum, so Thousand Demon Ridge probably had reserves too, though not in large numbers. This was a life-saving trump card for any cultivator. After experiencing its power, Lu Yi had been unable to forget it. Compared to the loss of a golden body token, the 100,000 contribution points he spent on the Divine Opportunity column in the Carnage Coliseum was negligible. Contribution points could be accumulated slowly, but golden body tokens were not easily obtainable. "You jest, Cultivator Lu. I have never even seen a golden body token in my life, so where would I find one for you?" Wu Jun's face darkened. And even if they did have one, the Thousand Demon Ridge wouldn't possibly give it to Lu Yi. The golden body token was valuable even for Divine Ocean Realm cultivators since it was a divine protection bestowed by the heavens. Before its time limit, no one could break through its defense. In that case, there's no need to say more. The two options are before you, so just choose for yourselves. Wu Jun shouted, "Yi, we came here to discuss with you in good faith. Don't try to take advantage of us." Lu Ye's fingers touched the inviolable saber, and his eyes were slightly downcast. "Do you think the Thousand Demon Ridge will seek revenge for you if I kill the two of you here? Unless, are you curious to know whether I can actually kill you or not?" Wu Jun and Yun Qingyue's expressions changed, both of them becoming alert. Fortunately, Lu Yi showed no signs of attacking them. However, it was evident that he was getting impatient, and if they lingered here, this young man might actually make his move. If they really died here, the trip would have been pointless. Ye's hands were already stained with the blood of Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators, and 2 more casualties wouldn't matter. At this thought, Yun Qingyue spoke, "We will report our discussion with Cultivator Lu back as soon as possible, and we will come again to inform you of any results." Saying so, she signaled to Wu Jun with her eyes, then they both flew away from Skysword Peak together. After flying a dozen kilometers away, Yun Qingyue took in a long breath, her chest rising high before falling again. In that moment she truly felt that she had had a brush with death. She never imagined that as a real Lake Realm cultivator, she would be so powerless in front of a Cloud River Realm cultivator. Not far away from her, Wu Jun's expression seemed normal, but there was also a trace of fear in his eyes. "Send a message back and see what the Divine Ocean Realm Masters decide," Yun Qingyue said. Wu Jun nodded in silence. Without delay, they relayed the result of their negotiation to the cultivators back at their own outposts, who would then pass it back to Jianghu. However, both of them knew that the Thousand Demon Ridge was likely to suffer heavy losses again this time, unless they dared to ignore Ye's threat. But would anyone dare to ignore him? As he said, he wouldn't attack all the outposts, just select a few of them. Who would dare to bet that their outpost wouldn't become one of the unlucky ones? That was not something they could gamble on. The most pressing matter was, if Yi went directly to one of the Thousand Demon Ridge's outposts and asked for a peace offering, then threatened to attack their outpost if they didn't pay up, what would one do in such a situation? Give in to his demands, of course. Compared to the amount they had spent on their own outpost, what was a few 100,000 contributions worth of resources worth? As such, Lu Yi only needed to spend some time to visit each outpost one by one, and he could still achieve his goal without completely disrupting the balance of the Spirit Creek battlefield. They didn't have to wait long, and in less than half a day they got a response. Sure enough, the Divine Ocean Realm Masters compromised. They had no choice, and even though it was shameful, they had no capital to refuse. In response, however, the Thousand Demon Ridge also had their own demands. The message clearly stated that if Yi couldn't accept these demands, then the Thousand Demon Ridge was prepared for a mutually destructive ending. At that time, they would abandon all their outposts and gather the forces in the core circle to destroy all the Grand Sky Coalition's outposts as well. To let both jade and stone burn together in complete destruction could also be seen as the last resort of the Thousand Demon Ridge. After reading the message, Yun Qingyue sighed. She didn't know whether Yi would accept these demands either. Strictly speaking, the Thousand Demon Ridge was the disadvantaged party, and if Yi refused, nobody could do anything to him about it. After a moment of contemplation, Yun Qingyue said, "Senior Brother Wu, I'll go by myself this time, you wait here." With the negotiation coming to a close, there was no need for the tough guy to appear anymore in case it stiffened the atmosphere later. How could I just stay behind? What if Yi tries to harm you? How would you defend yourself then? Wu Jun shook his head immediately. Yun Qingyue said, "With his strength, even if you and I join forces, we would still be no match for him if he decides to attack." What she said left a bitter taste in Wu Jun's mouth, yet he could not refute her. "Senior Brother Wu, just wait for me here. I'll be back soon." That Yi doesn't seem like someone who can't be reasoned with. In that case, be careful, junior sister. Keep in touch with me at all times. Wu Jun nodded. Yun Qingyue took out her flower basket spirit artifact and flew away. In a short while, she arrived at Skysword Peak again, and the young man was still sitting in the same place, holding a roll of paper which he studied attentively. The sunlight broke through the sea of clouds and shone on the young man's profile, giving him a somewhat scholarly air. However, this was the man who was giving the entirety of the Great Thousand Demon Ridge faction an extreme headache. Moreover, he was currently holding a butcher's blade over their heads, preparing to take a slice out of the Thousand Demon Ridge. When his blade came down, none of the core circle sects of the Thousand Demon Ridge could escape. "Cultivator Lu," Yun Qingyue called out in a soft voice before tucking her hair behind her ear, and her already impeccable appearance seemed to gain another hint of charm. "Have they come to a decision?" Lu Yi didn't even lift his head and continued pouring through the contents of his slips, which made Yun Qingyue feel as if she had launched her fist only for it to land on cotton. "The Divine Ocean Realm Masters have discussed the conditions, and they can agree to Cultivator Lu's demands. However, they also have one request. If Cultivator Lu can agree to that request, then we will send everything you asked for within 2 days." "Speak." "The Thousand Demon Ridge hopes that Cultivator Lu will never return to Spirit Creek Battlefield in the future." Chapter 546, Pettiness. On Skysword Peak, Lu Yi wrapped up the slips in his hand and looked up at Yun Qingyue. His gaze was calm, but his words were decisive. "Go. I won't kill you. And also, pass on this message to your superiors. As long as this Lu is alive, I will come to the Spirit Creek Battlefield every 6 months and pick out 30 core circle sects to raise their outposts." Saying so, he stood up slowly and brought out his flight-type artifact as if he was going to leave at once. Alarmed, Yun Qingyue quickly called out, "Please wait, Cultivator Lu. What else do you want?" Lu Yi cocked his head to the side while looking at her. The Thousand Demon Ridge wanted him to refrain from setting foot on the Spirit Creek battlefield in the future, but he would never accept such a condition. He had no need to enter the Spirit Creek battlefield anymore after advancing into the Cloud River realm, nor would he threaten the Thousand Demon Ridge with either the cultivators in the Spirit Creek battlefield or the matters concerning it, as one may do the same thing once or twice, but never thrice. Including this time, he had extorted the Thousand Demon Ridge twice, and if he were to do it again, they would definitely tolerate his threats and would most likely fight to the death with him. However, it should be up to his own wishes whether or not he chooses to enter the Spirit Creek battlefield. It was not up to the Thousand Demon Ridge to force him to stay out of it. If they insisted on maintaining that stance, then there was no longer any need for them to speak further. Facing Lu Yi, Yun Qingyue felt powerless and could only sigh. "Cultivator Lu, the matter is still negotiable." She knew that as they had reached this point of the negotiation, then she must never show any signs of weakness on her end. However, it was no longer possible. Lu Yi was taking his leave, and if she did not show weakness now, then the 30 sects in the Thousand Demon Ridge faction may end up having to suffer. And he even said that he would come once every half a year. How could anyone withstand that? If that truly were to happen, then there will be no Spirit Creek Realm cultivator in any core circle sect that will have a peaceful space to cultivate in the future. The Spirit Creek Realm was the foundation for all sects, and if that foundation was to be broken, then it would shake the future development of the entire sect. Standing on the spirit boat, Lu Yi looked at Yun Qingyue in silence. Yun Qingyue pursed her red lips and finally broke the silence after a long while. "Unless a situation like what you experienced in the Carnage Coliseum happens again, then Cultivator Lu must not attack the outposts in the Spirit Creek battlefield for no reason." Compared to the previous condition, this had much more leeway. It did not restrict Lu Ye's entry into the Spirit Creek battlefield and instead restricted his actions against the Thousand Demon Ridges sects and clans, but that was only if the incident in the Carnage Coliseum did not happen again. Though they were simple words, Lu Ye did manage to glean some information about the Thousand Demon Ridges' stance. Clearly they still had not given up on killing him. Inside the Carnage Coliseum, so many of the Thousand Demon Ridges experts who had cultivation levels that far surpassed Lu Ye pursued after him jointly, and they even employed the secret techniques of the tracking disc to make it so he had nowhere to run or hide. In the end, Lu Ye found himself encircled by hundreds, even thousands of people. Setting aside the long-standing grudges and disputes between the two major factions, the Thousand Demon Ridge had indeed gone overboard in that event. He was fortunate to have survived the attack, but not without paying a tremendous price. So, when he came to the Spirit Creek battlefield seeking revenge, no one could blame him for doing so. However, if in the future the Thousand Demon Ridge were to target Lu Ye again, they would undoubtedly exercise more caution and would never give him the chance to retaliate again. This is the bottom line of the Divine Ocean Realm Master's compromise. If Cultivator Lu cannot agree, then please feel free to do as you please. After saying her piece, she stared at Lu Ye anxiously, unsure of whether he would accept. Lu Ye calmly nodded. Sure. Anything else? While he was aware that the Thousand Demon Ridge had not given up on killing him, honestly, the path of cultivation would be dull without such trials. Ever since he stepped onto the path of cultivation, Lu Ye had been facing opponents stronger than himself, especially after his identity as a disciple of the Crimson Blood sect was exposed. He had faced various forms of suppression and opposition without cessation. It was precisely through these trials that he advanced so triumphantly and dominated the Spirit Creek battlefield. The Thousand Demon Ridge also wouldn't fear targeting him again just because of this incident, and he had no grounds to demand that the Thousand Demon Ridge cease targeting him in the future either. These matters were mutually understood, and there was no need for explicit clarification. Seeing that Lu Ye had agreed, Yun Qingyue let out a long sigh of relief, and her expression eased considerably. She had always been kind in nature and was truly unwilling to witness excessive bloodshed. Furthermore, every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt its debtor. If Cultivator Lu wishes to seek reprisal in the future, please direct your efforts towards those truly responsible and do not involve innocent parties. The cultivators who troubled Lu Ye in the Carnage Coliseum were all from different backgrounds, but it was certain that not all of the Core Circle sect's disciples were involved. However, Lu Ye's conditions encompassed all the Core Circle sects, inadvertently subjecting many to undue harm, yet they could not explain themselves out of the situation. They couldn't just ask Lu Ye to raise his hand high in mercy because their own disciples were not part of the Carnage Coliseum incident, right? That would make them a laughingstock. Of course. Lu Ye nodded. Anything else? Yun Qingyue shook her head. No. For a moment she felt taken aback. Was everything settled so easily? She had thought that Yi wouldn't agree so readily and had even prepared numerous arguments to persuade him only to find that none were necessary. You're done, but I have two more conditions. Yun Qingyue's expression stiffened and she urged him nervously, please speak, Cultivator Lu. Inside the Carnage Coliseum, there was an individual named Xiao Liang who wielded the blade. If I'm not mistaken, he should be from the Raving Bladesmen. I won't be visiting the Raving Bladesmen's outpost, but please relay this for me. Besides 30,000 contribution points worth of resources, they must also provide 20 sets of blade technique insights. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind paying them a visit. Yun Qingyue took careful note of it. Very well. As long as they were not unique copies, blade technique insights were not highly valuable. Even then, extra copies could be made. The Raving Bladesmen likely had an abundance of such insights, so 20 shouldn't be difficult for them to take out. Additionally, the Wind Cloud Mansion's share should be increased by 100,000 contribution points. The Wind Cloud Mansion. Yun Qingyue was speechless. Wasn't the Wind Cloud Mansion senior brother Wu's sect? Yi asking the Wind Cloud Mansion to increase their offering by 100,000 was undoubtedly a response to Wu Jun's poor attitude during the previous negotiations. This young brat appeared reasonable on the surface but was actually quite petty. Putting up a show to manipulate me should come with consequences, don't you think so, Cultivator Yun? Lu Ye shot a glance at Yun Qingyue. Yun Qingyue forced a smile. It seems Cultivator Lu saw through our act from the start. It wasn't a particularly sophisticated tactic to begin with, so it was to be expected that they would be caught. With a sigh, Yun Qingyue continued, I will relay your conditions back to my faction, but before we conclude this, I must ask Cultivator Lu to sign the Sacred Pact. Very well. Verbal promises were not as binding as a sacred pact. Yun Qingyue promptly produced the sacred pact, listing a series of terms before handing it to Lu Yi to review. Lu Yi carefully inspected it, making sure there were no hidden loopholes before stamping his own handprint on it. Yun Qingyue, representing the Thousand Demon Ridge, also imprinted her handprint. Then the sacred pact radiated with a brilliant light that signified that the contract was formed. After putting away the sacred pact, Yun Qingyue felt much more relieved. Honestly, despite facing only a Cloud River Realm cultivator, the burden on her heart had been unprecedentedly heavy. Now that things had been settled, her mission was finally over. Well, Cultivator Lu, until we meet again. Yun Qingyue bowed gracefully to Lu Yi and summoned her flower basket spirit artifact, flying away. Lu Yi watched her leave and contemplated for a moment. Instead of continuing to read, he went to the side, retrieved his saber and cut down a large tree in a neat stroke before chopping it into several sections, busying himself in this manner. Time passed. 3 days later, Lu Yi, who sat on a stone reading, suddenly spoke up. Leave the items here. Take the corresponding wooden plaque for each sect's offering. You can take it as a return gift from this Lu. Once the 10-day deadline is up, the wooden plaques of the sects remaining here will be the sects I visit. Though there was no one in front of him, Lu Yi had perceived the presence of some unfamiliar auras around him. These people were naturally here to deliver the offerings, yet they hesitated to reveal themselves due to his imposing reputation. Hearing Lu Ye's words, they turned to look towards the area several meters away from him. There lay hundreds of wooden plaques, each carved with the name of a sect, corresponding to each sect in the Thousand Demon Ridge. Lu Yi had meticulously carved these wooden plaques based on the markings on the 10-point map, so he couldn't possibly miss any sect. Rather than a means to keep count, however, he was using this method to strengthen his memory. There were so many sects in the Thousand Demon Ridge. Through this, Lu Yi was able to more or less recognize the sects in the core circle, so if he bumped into any of the Thousand Demon Ridge's cultivators in the future, if he tried to ask for their sect names, this knowledge should help him match their background to what they claimed. Only now did they comprehend Lu Ye's intentions. It wasn't until a while later that people began showing themselves. They walked up to Lu Yi, placed down a storage bag before him, then took a wooden plaque with them before quickly departing. With someone to start things off, more people soon emerged, placing down their storage bags without a word and taking away their own sect's wooden plaques. Time passed, and as the pile of storage bags before Lu Yi grew, the number of wooden plaques shrank. Every cultivator who came to deliver the offerings could see the impressive stack of storage bags, and they knew that they contained valuable items worth millions of contribution points, but no one dared to be greedy. It took a lot to finally settle things with Yi, and if anything unexpected were to happen at this point, not only would Yi not spare them, the sects behind them would also draw the ire of the Thousand Demon Ridge faction. At a certain moment, Lu Yi could sense that the wooden plaque of the Raving Bladesmen had been taken. With a raise of his hand, he retrieved the storage bag that had just been left behind. Upon opening it, he found not only various treasures but also 20 sets of blade technique insights. Sure enough, that Xiao Liang was indeed from the Raving Bladesmen. Otherwise, the Raving Bladesmen wouldn't have given in so obediently. When Lu Yi personally visited them before, he had only gotten 10 sets of blade technique insights out of them. Eagerly, Lu Yi began perusing one of the copies. Inwardly, he could only sigh since there were no sects within the Grand Sky Coalition that specialized in blade techniques. Otherwise, he could have furthered his training without needing to ask for blade technique insights from someone else. Moreover, the insights they provided were unlikely to be the best. Given Lu Ye's current strength and mastery of blade techniques, these insights could only offer minor improvements and wouldn't lead to any breakthroughs. If only the Grand Sky Coalition could conquer the Raving Bladesmen someday. Of course, that was not but a wishful thought. The Raving Bladesmen was a first-tier sect with a profound foundation. Conquering them was easier said than done. Chapter 547, Turns Out It's a Beast? 7 days after Lu Yi had spoken with Yun Qingyue, only 2 wooden plaques were left in front of him. This meant that out of all of the core circle sects in the Thousand Demon Ridge, only 2 did not come forward. And the words carved into the 2 wooden plaques were New Moon Sect and Clouded Sun Clan respectively. It was impossible for them to come. Their outposts have already been razed and some of their disciples were either injured or dead, so why would they still run over to send offerings to Lu Yi? Lu Yi had expected this, so he didn't care. He got up to stretch, feeling extremely spirited after meditating for this period of time. His work in the Spirit Creek battlefield was done and there was no longer any need for him to stay here. However, he could go and visit Wuxia before he left. He wondered how she was doing, and based on the time that had passed since they last met, he reckoned that she had already advanced into the Cloud River realm. Summoning his spirit boat, he took to the skies and flew in the myriad poison forest direction. The wind whistled through Skysword Peak. Only 2 wooden plaques with different names carved onto them were left behind. Twice Lu Yi had raked in large amounts of resources from the Thousand Demon Ridge here, leaving the Skysword Peak to become a pain in the hearts of the many Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators. Even many years in the future, the cultivators of that faction would rather go around Skysword Peak than to ever step foot near it. The myriad poison forest was located within the core circle and was not too far from Skysword Peak. In one day, Lu Yi leisurely arrived at the space above the forest, a look of surprise emerging on his face. The myriad poison forest was different from how he remembered it. The most obvious change was the fact that the myriad poison forest seemed to have shrunken greatly in size, and the area that used to be enveloped in a fog of poison had now become safe to traverse. Overall, it seemed to have shrunken at least 30 to 40% in size. This place was a forbidden area of the Spirit Creek battlefield, and also a place that the cultivators would not choose to step into without good reason. Not only was the place still filled with an invisible fog of deadly poison, there were also many venomous insects living inside. Even a Heaven 9 cultivator would not be able to reach too deep into the forest. Could the shrinkage of the myriad poison forest domain have something to do with Wuxia? Lu Yi was aware that Wuxia needed to refine the poison fog for her cultivation, but how many months had gone by and the myriad poison forest looked like this already? If she were given more time, then wouldn't this forbidden area disappear completely? This woman was truly terrifying. He went straight inside the forest and made his way to its depths. He made his way to the wooden hut from before only to see a tall fence erected with the door to the hut tightly shut. Lu Yi went forward and knocked on the door. Anyone home? No response. He tried to sense inside, but there were no signs of vitality inside the wooden hut. Wuxia wasn't here? Lu Yi was surprised. He thought that Wuxia would keep on cultivating here, but he didn't expect to miss her completely, and he had no idea where she could have gone. He opened the door and went inside before studying the surroundings. There was not a single trace of dust in the hut, which undoubtedly meant that Wuxia still lived here. He just had no idea what she had gone off to do. Leaving the house, Lu Yi contemplated for a moment before heading to where Wuxia used to cultivate. Even when he used to live here, Wuxia did not cultivate in the hut, and that was because of the ward that Lu Yi had set up in the area. As long as the ward was up, it could keep the poison fog from encroaching, which made it difficult for her to cultivate. After walking a short distance, Lu Yi heard a gentle singing voice, as well as the sound of splashing water. This woman seemed to be in a good mood, but he wasn't sure what she was up to. He withdrew his aura and hid himself to try and give her a scare. She had been living alone here for several months without any contact with the outside world. She did not send him any messages either, so clearly she had no idea that he had arrived in the Spirit Creek battlefield. He was sure that she would definitely be surprised if he suddenly showed up out of the blue before her. Following the source of that song, he made his way through a short forest, and when he looked up, Lu Ye's expression turned stiff. A pool had appeared there at some point in time, but it was not very large, only around a dozen meters wide, and water in an abnormal shade of emerald rippled in the pool. Just looking at the water was enough to fill one with unease, so it was not hard to imagine just how toxic the water in the pool could be. Lu Yi had no idea how Wuxia had created this pool of poison, but it didn't exist when he and Yi used to stay here. Clearly Wuxia must have created it later. Most importantly, Wuxia actually turned out to be bathing at this moment. She was practically fully immersed in the pool with only her head peeking above the surface. 2 arms as delicate and fair as tender leeks lightly swung about on the water's surface, with several dainty toes coming out mischievously above the surface from time to time as she hummed a song he had never heard of. Just from what he could see alone, Lu Yi could guess the state that she was in right now. If he were to be found out, then surely he would be beaten up like some scoundrel, right? He never thought he would come here to see this either. Just as he was about to silently withdraw, the humming suddenly stopped. Then Lu Yi felt a sharp gaze staring right at where he was hiding. He had a bad feeling about this. A splash sounded as Wuxia lifted a jade hand, and an emerald water arrow shot out from the pool, aimed accurately at Lu Ye's position. Should I hide or not? Lu Yi was caught in a dilemma. If he hid, it would make him seem guilty, but if not, he would definitely be exposed. Before he could come to a decision, the water arrow hit him right in the chest. It didn't hurt him, but the arrow transformed into an emerald mist that enveloped Lu Ye's body, blowing his cover. Then Lu Ye felt a large billow of smoke rising from the tree of glyphs. My! In the water, Wuxia, who only had her head showing above the water, exclaimed with a smirk. I thought it was a little creature, but it turned out to be a beast. With feigned shock on her face, she spoke words that were even more poisonous than the water in the pool. Don't you start. Lu Ye grumbled. Who but me could come to a damned place like this? You knew it was me, so no need to put up an act. He could tell from how mild the arrow had been alone. Wuxia knew that Lu Ye was immune to many poisons, so the focus on the arrow was on toxicity rather than lethality. Of course, if it wasn't Lu Ye who came, nothing more than death would await whoever it was that came here. The poison in the water was several times more toxic compared to what Lu Ye had experienced here in the myriad poison forest. Ichim? How am I supposed to know? Wuxia giggled and splashed on the water. But what brought you here? Was the Cloud River battlefield not fun for you? No, it's great fun. Since he had already been exposed, Lu Ye simply went forward to the pool and crouched down, reaching out to scoop up some of the water with his hand. Even more smoke appeared above the tree of glyphs. Considering he might not have a large stock of fuel left, Lu Ye did not dare to mess around anymore. Otherwise it would give Wuxia a chance to mess with him. Something happened, so I came back. I figured I could come and visit while I'm here. So, I'm just an afterthought. Wuxia's expression turned gloomy at once. If anyone who didn't know the situation saw this, they would think that Lu Ye had played her before abandoning her. Even while saying so, the movement of her hands did not stop. Her slender neck, fair skin, and even the fantastical part in the front could be faintly seen. Combined with her wet hair and sad expression, Lu Ye felt his heartstrings being tugged at. Lu Ye wouldn't believe that she didn't do it on purpose even if he were beaten to death. Enjoying the view? Wuxia blushed, speaking shyly as she kept her head down amidst Lu Ye's gaze. And? Want to see more? Lu Ye sprang up at that. Can I? Wuxia kept her head lowered and muttered in a voice as quiet as a mosquito. I wouldn't do this for anyone else, of course. But it's fine, if it's you. Saying so, she pressed her eyes shut and her long lashes trembled nervously. Then she slowly stood up, allowing the emerald water to flow down her smooth neck, revealing a heavenly image. Lu Ye's eyes widened like brass bells. Ha ha, you're a big idiot. Standing in the water, Wuxia, who was wearing a dress, laughed so wantonly that her body arched back, taunting him. Lu Ye shut his eyes in pain. It was absolutely shameful of him to have had any expectations of this woman. But who could have guessed that a woman soaking in a pool would turn out to be completely dressed? Lu Ye stood up and made to leave. Wuxia shouted at him from behind. Hey, where are you going? None of your business. She got his hopes up about getting a view of divine beauty, only to then smash those hopes to the ground. He still had his dignity to upkeep. After a while, a groomed Wuxia appeared in the wooden hut. There she saw Lu Ye lying on a hammock in the courtyard with his hands behind his head, looking up at the sky, bored. Wuxia walked up to Lu Ye, her body wrapped in fragrance, and she leaned down to look at him. Are you upset? What's there to be upset about? Lu Ye rolled his eyes. I'm hungry. Go make some food. Even though Wuxia's food looked bad on the surface, the taste and effects were quite good. They were all very nutritious dishes. Very well. Saying so, Wuxia leaned down even further. Before Lu Ye could react, a light peck landed on his forehead. Before she could pull back, Lu Ye grabbed her arms. Wuxia was confused. What are you doing? What are you doing? Aren't you angry? I'm trying to make it up to you. She looked as if there was absolutely nothing wrong with what she just did. Am I a kid? Do I need you to kiss me on the forehead? Lu Ye was displeased. That was clearly a tactic used to coax young children. What do you want then? Lu Ye's gaze went down, starting at her plump red lips. A look of panic emerged in Wuxia's eyes and her breathing hitched for a moment. Soon, however, she put on an uncaring expression and met Lu Ye's gaze with a smile, her beautiful eyes as dazzling as the stars in the sky. Time passed bit by bit, and the two remained in this position without moving. It was only after a while that Lu Ye let go of her. Wuxia leapt back and taunted out of habit, "Scaredy cat. Get over here." Lu Ye bellowed. In your dreams. Wuxia giggled and ran even further away. The soft singing voice emerged again. Wuxia was clearly in a better mood than before, and it wasn't long before the courtyard was filled with the smell of food. Chapter 548, Good Times Have Come. Soon, Lu Yi was scarfing down food in the courtyard while the smoke coming out of the tree of Glyphs grew even stronger. It seemed like he would have to replenish the fuel again once he was back. Wuxia sat right across from him, sending food to his bowl from time to time while saying, "It's easy to be blinded by the complexities of the world. You should eat more to nurture yourself." Lu Yi pretended not to have heard her. "Where's Yi and Amber? I don't see them around." "They've returned to the outpost." Lu Yi took down 2 storage bags from his belt as he spoke, casually tossing them to the table. Wuxia picked them up, and when she saw the contents inside, she was surprised. "There's so much in here. Which sect did you rob this time?" Each storage bag was filled with the resources sent over by first-tier sects, and the 2 storage bags were worth a whopping 600,000 contribution points in goods. Of course, if these things were to be sold to the Vault of Providence, the value would be cut down slightly. Lu Yi drew a circle in the air. "All of the core circle sects. Not one of them escaped me this time." Wuxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What did they do to you?" "It's a long story, let's not talk about that." Naturally, there was no need to tell Wuxia about how he was chased in the Carnage Coliseum and was forced to use the Golden Body token in the end, then having to summon a Divine Opportunity column before he could escape successfully. It would just make her worry for nothing. "I can't use these for my cultivation." "If you can't use it, just sell it and get some contribution points out of it. Contribution points will be useful once you reach the Cloud River battlefield." Wuxia thought about it and nodded. "Very well. I'll accept it." "What's with that pool of poison?" Lu Yi casually asked. "It's the poison spring of the Myriad Poison Forest. I found it by chance and drew it over there. That way, cultivating will be much more effective than just refining the fog." It was exactly her ability to refine the energy in the pool that caused the Myriad Poison Forest to shrink in such a short amount of time. The changes happening in the forest had already attracted the attention of many. Only nobody could figure out what was going on. After all, in the Spirit Creek realm, the only person who could enter and leave the forest's depths unharmed was Lu Yi. Lu Yi was curious. "You've already reached Heaven 9, so how are you going to keep cultivating?" Heaven 9 was the peak of the Spirit Creek realm. Once one reached this level, then there was no way to keep on cultivating unless one advanced into the Cloud River realm. "I have my ways." Wuxia smiled. "Are you planning to refine the entire poison spring before moving on to the Cloud River realm?" "Of course. It's rare to have such a cultivation environment, so of course I'm going to make good use of it." "Is there a similar place as this in the Cloud River battlefield?" "I haven't found one, but I'll take note of it for you once I return. Mutant cores of spirit beasts will also work. Some of their cores are highly toxic. The Vault of Providence should have something like that. Once you advance into the Cloud River realm, you can go and buy some yourself. I'll also keep an eye out for you." Then he suddenly thought of something. "Have you reached the role of supremacy yet?" Wuxia then shot him a playful wink. "I've occupied the top of the role of supremacy for a few months now. Didn't you know?" Lu Yi was stunned. "The top of the role of supremacy? You. Don't you look down on me?" Wuxia wagged her fingers at him. Wuxia had the strength to make an impact on the role of supremacy, that Lu Yi was sure of. Back then she had killed many thousand Demon Ridge cultivators in the Myriad Poison Forest, but to say that she could occupy the top spot for months in a row was still more or less a surprise to him. But naturally Wuxia wouldn't joke about such a thing to him. First, there was the Crimson Blood Sect's Yi who ruled the role of supremacy for several months, and now there was the Crimson Blood Sect's Wuxia taking the top spot. And, from how things were going, it seemed she would continue to dominate the rankings for a long time to come. Especially since Wuxia was still publicly known as a medical cultivator. Lu Yi was curious to know what the mood of those Heaven 9 cultivators on the role of supremacy was like nowadays. Since ancient times, medical cultivators were rarely able to make it within the top 50 of the role of supremacy, but then there was Wuxia who occupied the topmost position. On second thought, however, Wuxia may be a medical cultivator, but after gaining her complete inheritance, she was no longer the same as the other regular medical cultivators. Most such cultivators would also cultivate the way of spells or some other school for the sake of self-preservation, but Wuxia did not adopt any of them. Strictly speaking, she was now a poisoneer. Medicine and poison have always been of one category, and as a poisoneer, Wuxia was different from the general poisoneer. If she willed it, then she could even emit poison from her breath, not to mention transmitting venom through touch. With this sort of heritage, occupying the top spot of the role of supremacy should naturally be no issue for her. The Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators who challenged her would often not be able to see her before their minds were stirred up by her poison and forced to admit defeat or flee. After that happened a few times, nobody dared to challenge Wuxia for her position anymore. What the Thousand Demon Ridge wanted to know was where this Crimson Blood Sect's medical cultivator was hiding, since no one had seen her in the Spirit Creek battlefield. She never even appeared in the outposts of any sect before. To the Thousand Demon Ridge, Lu Yi was a nightmare, but at the very least he would show himself outside and stir up some wind and rain. However, Wuxia was like a riddle without an answer. In the entirety of the Spirit Creek battlefield in the recent year or so, Bingzhou's Crimson Blood Sect was simply like a mountain weighing down on the heads of the Thousand Demon Ridge's cultivators, so heavy that it made it hard for them to breathe. After having his fill of food and drink, Lu Yi stretched his back with a comfy look on his face. While cleaning up the dishes, Wuxia asked, "Are you leaving now?" "You should come to the Cloud River battlefield soon too. I'll be waiting for you there." "I will. By the way, do you have more of the omni-poison pill you gave me last time? Those pills could play a very strong role in specific environments. For example, in the Myriad Beast domain. If Lu Yi hadn't sacrificed the omni-poison pill, then he wouldn't have been able to deal with that Niu Meng. Even though that pill was a double-edged sword, if used well, it can also play a role in turning the tides in a desperate situation." "I do." While saying so, Wuxia reached into her dress and pulled out a handful of green omni-poison pills that were still warm with her body heat. Lu Yi's eyes twitched at that. Looking at the dozen of omni-poison pills, he didn't stand on ceremony and took 3 from the pile, storing them inside his storage sphere. "Take more." "I can always make more," Wuxia insisted. "No need. These are enough for self-defense." He didn't know what it cost Wuxia to make these omni-poison pills, but he was sure that they didn't come easy, so he naturally couldn't squander it. "I'm going now." Lu Yi turned around and waved to her before bringing out his spirit boat. Upon stepping on it and pouring his spiritual power into it, it took to the skies. Wuxia stood in place watching him go, raising her hands around her mouth and shouting, "Be careful out there, my child's father." Lu Yi stumbled and almost fell off his spirit boat. He looked down and glared at Wuxia, only to see her giggling sweetly like blossoming flowers. After watching Lu Yi's figure disappear into the distance, Wuxia also stretched her back, accentuating her beautiful and graceful figure. She was going to be alone again, but in these recent months she had gotten used to such a life, so she didn't feel that lonely. Still, she had to work hard on cultivating and strive to refine the poison spring entirely so that she could join him on the Cloud River battlefield soon. She was still a medical cultivator at the very least and could help him heal his injuries as she followed him around. Through the clear blue sky and picturesque scenery, Lu Yi hurried on his way. The calm journey led him out of the core circle, into the inner circle, then to the outer circle before he finally made it to his outpost. In fact, he could have used the Divine Opportunity column of the Divine Trade Association nearby to teleport straight back to the outpost after leaving the Myriad Poison Forest, but that would also cost a good amount of contribution points. It wasn't that he had anything to do recently anyway, and he couldn't enter the Cloud River battlefield either, so there was no need to waste money. In 3 days, Lu Yi arrived at the Crimson Blood Sect's outpost, and as soon as he entered the Grand Defensive Ward, he heard the clear voice of an eagle ring out. Raising his head to look at the Spirit Peak nearby, he saw a familiar figure standing there, staring at him. Beaky had returned. Lu Yi got on his spirit artifact and flew towards the Spirit Peak and arrived at the eagle's nest, feeding the fish that he had caught from Lunarmere to Beaky before playing with it for a while. Then he entered the Sanctum of Providence. An endless stream of disciples saluted him on the way. There were those from the Crimson Blood Sect itself, as well as those from outside sects who had come to train. There were even female cultivators with hot personalities that would take the initiative to come up and make small talk with him, looks of reverence clear in their eyes. After dismissing those cultivators, Lu Yi stood in front of the Divine Opportunity column and pressed his hand on it, then he connected his consciousness to the Vault of Providence. He had to sell some things to the Vault of Providence. Only then could he ensure that he would have enough contribution points for his use. This time he had received a total of 20 to 30 million worth of resources, so even if he sold them all to the Vault of Providence and took the sale loss, he would still be able to pocket more than 10,000 million contribution points. Naturally, however, Lu Yi wouldn't sell everything. As long as he had enough contribution points for his own temporary use, then that was enough. The rest would be better off handed over to his second senior sister to ensure the smooth development and operation of the sect. Especially as his second senior sister was now in the Divine Ocean realm, her cultivation needs were quite hefty. Cultivators in the Spirit Creek realm could cultivate in the Spirit Creek battlefield, but as they reached the Cloud River realm and arrived at the Cloud River battlefield, there was no specific battlefield to head to after advancing into the Real Lake realm. Lu Yi wasn't particularly sure how the Real Lake realm and Divine Ocean realm masters were supposed to cultivate, but it was said to be related to a clan's heritage. The stronger the clan's heritage, the faster the Real Lake realm and Divine Ocean realm masters could advance. So, in the entirety of Jiuzhou, the powerful sects kept on pumping out strong experts, whereas the weaker sects could only slowly accumulate strength and develop, just waiting for the day that they could leap over the Dragon's Gate. With Shui Yuan's talent, she had, in fact, long been qualified to advance to the Divine Sea realm, but until half a year ago she was still in the Ninth Order Real Lake realm. It wasn't that she wasn't qualified to advance, but it was due to the Crimson Blood sect's pitiful condition that they did not have enough resources to support her in her cultivation. However, with the rise of Lu Yi, the good days had finally come for the Crimson Blood sect. When Lu Yi put together a Grand Sky Coalition army in the Inner Circle and conquered all the four corners of the realm, he forced the Thousand Demon Ridge to bend to his will and sent out a great offering of resources in order to calm the situation down. Chapter 549 Spirit Storage Ring. That batch of resources was split between the Grand Sky Coalition's many sects, but as Lu Yi was the one to be credited for this effort, the Crimson Blood sect occupied most of it. And it was thanks to that batch of resources that Shui Yuan could fully step into the Divine Ocean realm. They were focused on developing the sect at the time, so Shui Yuan didn't dare to use up too much of the resources. However, as Lu Yi spread across the core circle, extorting all the Thousand Demon Ridge's core circle sects for resources worth 20 to 30 millions of contribution points worth of resources, Shui Yuan wasn't as restricted in the resources that she could take. It was foreseeable that with another batch of resources entering their storage, Shui Yuan's cultivation would only increase in the future. After all, in the whole of the Crimson Blood sect, she and the sect master were the only two Divine Ocean realm masters, and the sect master no longer needed to cultivate. If Shui Yuan were willing, she could pour the resources of her entire sect onto herself, an advantage that no Divine Ocean realm master could ever hope to match. Lu Yi was only in the Cloud River realm at this time, so he didn't have to worry too much about future matters. After all, it wouldn't be too late to wait until he advanced into the Real Lake realm before dealing with it. Inside the Vault of Providence, Lu Yi dug through his storage sphere and sold some resources that he and his sect weren't in need of fire now, and he saw his contribution points being raised at a visibly fast rate. It wasn't until he was close to the 300,000 contribution points mark that he finally stopped. This much was more than enough for his own use. Even if he encountered some overwhelming danger in the future, he could summon a Divine Opportunity column to escape. Still, it wasn't a guarantee to be able to escape just because he could summon a Divine Opportunity column. He had the protection of the Golden Body token when he was in the Carnage Coliseum, and that was the reason why all those Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators failed to do anything to him. Without it, even if he did manage to summon a Divine Opportunity column, he might not have been able to reach it. So, that method could only be used when he could ensure that he had enough time and space to pull it off. Then, Lu Yi bought some flames of earthen spirits and swallowed them up piece by piece. He had to hurry and replenish the Tree of Glyphs fuel stock. He had only known previously that the Tree of Glyphs could burn toxins, but it was only now that he realized that the Tree of Glyphs could even burn the judgment of the heavens inside of him, so there was no saying what else it could burn in the future, and thus it was only natural that he should put more care into refueling it. Time passed, and one by one, the flames of earthen spirits were consumed. To Lu Ye's surprise, the leaves on the Tree of Glyphs didn't react at all. It wasn't until he swallowed nearly 200 flames of earthen spirits that one of the leaves on the Tree of Glyphs showed any signs that it was beginning to burn. Lu Yi guessed that his encounter this time had caused a crisis in the Tree of Glyphs, and so the flames of earthen spirits he had consumed before had all been turned into fuel. It was only when he felt that his reserves were almost full that he began to see changes in the leaves. It had been a long time since he had gotten any new glyphs from the tree, so Lu Yi was naturally curious about what sort of glyphs he would get next. So, he continued buying flames of earthen spirits and devoured all of them. After buying almost 100 more pieces, Lu Yi was surprised to find that there were no more for him to buy. This surprised him as it turned out that the stock of flames of earthen spirits in the Vault of Providence actually had a limit. He always thought that the goods in the Vault of Providence never ran out. But come to think of it, he had simply taken it for granted. The things in the Vault of Providence did not come out of thin air. All of the treasures sold inside had to have come from somewhere. The most widely rumored theory was that the contents in the Vault of Providence were related to the Divine Trade Association. That was because someone had once sold something to the Divine Trade Association, only to find traces of it appearing in the Vault of Providence. In that case, the flames of earthen spirits should also have been collected by cultivators from somewhere before being sold to the Vault of Providence. Lu Yi wasn't sure where these flames could be collected. The ones who used them either refined pills or spirit artifacts, so the purchase amount would not be too large, thus there was always a large stock available. But when it came to him, he would buy several dozen to hundreds of these flames at a time. Even more outrageously, he had bought a few hundred this time and completely dried up the stock in the vault. If flames of earthen spirits were out, there should still be other flames. Lu Yi searched the Vault of Providence for more of what he needed. A few moments later, many things related to flames appeared in his field of vision. However, each item was different and most of the ones that appeared were core flames. Core flames were not used for refining pills. Instead, they were the mutant cores of fire attribute spirit beasts, and each core was just like a ball of flames. The prices were also different for each one. The cheapest one started at 500 to 600, but there were also those that cost up to tens of thousands. Among them, Lu Yi also noticed one that was called Paramount Glacial Flame, which should be a type of mystic flame. Just looking at it gave one a chilling feeling, and the flame even had a ghostly blue color. This thing was also ridiculously expensive at 180,000 contribution points. He couldn't help but think of the true phoenix flame he had gotten in the Burning Lands. If this thing was put into the Vault of Providence, then it would surely fetch a hefty price as well. Perhaps, its price may even be higher than this Paramount Glacial Flame. Since it was Lu Yi who got his hands on it, he would only use it for the consumption of the Tree of Glyphs. But others could use these flames to cultivate some special secret arts, and thus the value was naturally not the same as the rest. Devouring the true phoenix flame added Glyph, Fire Phoenix, to the Tree of Glyphs, so Lu Yi was curious to know what sort of changes the Tree of Glyphs would show if he were to devour the Paramount Glacial Flame. However, the price of 180,000 contribution points was enough to dissuade him from that thought. Even if he had the capital to afford it, he still decided to give up on it after some thought. He couldn't expect to get some sort of glacial glyph by consuming this Paramount Glacial Flame. After all, such a glyph didn't exist in the world, and if he didn't get a corresponding glyph from it and simply used it as fuel, it would not be cost-effective. Lu Yi didn't stop until he bought up all of the flames that cost less than 1,000 contribution points. The total damage racked up to nearly 300,000 contribution points. To have spent so much at once, money truly did go as quickly as it came. And this was only the Cloud River realm. Once he arrived at the real Lake realm or the Divine Ocean realm, he would really need to spend a lot of contribution points. Talent and qualifications were certainly important in the path of cultivation, but without sufficient financial support, it would still be difficult for one to raise their cultivation level quickly. The Tree of Glyphs was still devouring the flames, but Lu Yi was prepared to save some as spares in case he encountered a situation where the Tree of Glyphs ran out of fuel again. Immersing his mind, he saw the leaves on the Tree of Glyphs burning up one by one as the flames were consumed. Lu Yi couldn't help but be excited about what he would get. Compared to the glyphs that he learned from books, he could use the ones from the Tree of Glyphs at will, which often came with the possibility of increasing his strength in some way. He continued searching through the Vault of Providence. Next, he had to find spirit artifacts that could store spiritual power. He had used Glyph, Fire Phoenix twice, and he remembered both experiences vividly in his mind. He had to say that though this glyph could set the tune with one beat of the gong at times, the price he had to pay in order to use this glyph was also great. The after effects he could recuperate from as long as he had a safe place to rest afterwards. However, the spiritual power that was needed to support this glyph was terrifying, and that was a problem that had to be dealt with. He'd used Glyph, Spirit Storage to complete the construction of this glyph, but if he had a spirit artifact that could do the job, then it wouldn't have to be as troublesome. He could simply store spiritual power into the spirit artifact beforehand, then use it when he needed it. All varieties of treasures could be found in the Vault of Providence, so there should be no shortage of the spirit artifact he needed. Sure enough, hundreds of spirit artifacts appeared in Lu Ye's vision after a moment. Even though they were all of different quality, the price differed as well. They were even in different shapes and sizes. After browsing through them, Lu Yi finally settled on a ring. A ring was easy to wear and not easy to lose. Moreover, it was of good quality, equivalent to a top-grade spirit artifact. Within the realm of spirit artifacts, The quality of a spirit artifact was determined by how many restraining locks were built into it. Below 9 restraining locks meant it was a low-grade spirit artifact. 9 to 18 signified middle grade. 18 to 27 were high grade. And 27 to 36 were top grade. As the quality differed, the price naturally changed as well. Generally, top-grade spirit artifacts cost between 1,500 and 2,000 contribution points in the Vault of Providence, but the difference was not too great. From Lu Ye's perspective, a mere 1,000 to 2,000 contribution points were naturally nothing. He could simply spend it without worry. However, for most Cloud River Realm cultivators, even a few thousand was a lot, especially since each cultivator needed more than one spirit artifact. Spirit artifacts had to be constantly replaced as their level of cultivation increased. So, cultivators tended to spend a lot of contribution points on their spirit artifacts. Of course, it was possible to purchase them using spirit stones from the Divine Trade Association, but one had to first have enough of them in order to make the purchase. When it really came down to it, however, purchasing goods using spirit stones would actually be more expensive than spending contribution points. The spirit storage ring that Lu Yi chose was slightly ridiculous, costing a whopping 4,000 contribution points. For one, spirit bank artifacts were special and not weapons for cultivators to fight with. Such spirit artifacts generally cost more than the usual spirit artifact since their numbers were limited. Secondly, this was the smallest of the spirit bank spirit artifacts and also the most portable, so it was naturally more expensive. With the spirit storage ring now in his possession, Lu Yi put it on his finger and found it to be very suitable. It didn't affect his blade swings either, and it had the ability of absorbing and storing the spiritual power that usually drifted out from the surface of a cultivator's body. So, even if Lu Yi didn't actively pour spiritual power into it, as long as he wore it for a long enough period of time, it would be able to store a sufficient amount. When Lu Yi needed it, it was much more efficient for him to extract spiritual power straight from the ring rather than using spirit pills to recover his power. He had bought all that he needed to buy and sold all that needed to be sold. Then Lu Yi checked his battlefield imprint. The contribution column read, 193,643 contribution points. Now it was time for the main event. The reward from the Carnage Coliseum's roster of Carnage. Since returning from the Carnage Coliseum, Lu Yi hadn't bothered to deal with the reward. Instead, he headed straight into the Spirit Creek battlefield as soon as he recovered. Now he finally had the time to check it. When the Carnage Coliseum closed back then, the heavens engraved a golden mark on the back of his hand. Through that mark, Lu Yi could link with the Vault of Providence from any Divine Opportunity column and retrieve his reward there. Chapter 550 New Glyphs. The first place reward of the roster of Carnage was what Lu Yi had been looking forward to the most. After all, it was a reward that could directly aid him in cultivation. For the current him, nothing was more important than that. Inside the Vault of Providence, Lu Yi immersed his consciousness and connected it with the golden mark on the back of his hand. Then his vision blurred and he appeared inside of a secret room. The room wasn't very large and there was a table at the very center of it. There were only 2 chests placed on the table, one big and one small, looking extremely simple. On each chest was a golden mark, which was the same mark that the heavens left on the back of Lu Ye's hand. The mark just looked like a golden octagonal disc with nothing special about it. Walking forward, he opened up the larger chest and all of a sudden, the room was filled with a dazzling golden light. Lu Yi waited for the light to subside before looking into the chest. There, several golden amulets entered his vision. He took them out one by one and there were exactly 9 of them in total. Counting the 2 golden amulets that he had, now he had a total of 11 of them with this addition. He still had amulets of other qualities as well. For a 3rd order Cloud River Realm cultivator to have so many amulets was simply unheard of. Since ancient times, no single cultivator from Jianghu had ever been in possession of so many amulets at once and at such a low cultivation level. If it wasn't for the rewards from the roster of Carnage, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to achieve such a feat either. Mainly, it was the Glyph, Fire Phoenix he used at the end that killed a large number of the Thousand Demon Ridges cultivators, allowing him to ascend into the top position of the roster of Carnage. With so many amulets in hand, Lu Yi estimated that if he were to use all of them, it wouldn't be too hard for him to reach the 5th order Cloud River Realm. Of course, not all of these 9 golden amulets belonged to him. He still had to split them with Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan later, so he could only have 3 of them. After putting the amulets away, Lu Yi looked to the smaller chest. The large chest contained the golden amulets, so the small chest should contain the legendary Primus-level Wisp of Sanctification. Even though Lu Yi had a Tertius-level Arcane Glade at some point, he had never seen what the Wisp of Sanctification actually looked like. He raised his hand to open the small chest, but nothing unusual happened. When he looked down, however, a frown formed on his brow. There in the chest lay a white and chubby thing like a chrysalis. It was the length of a palm and seemed to be alive, and that was because Lu Yi could sense that it was breathing, and following its breaths, its body appeared solid at times and illusory at others. So this is a Primus-level Wisp of Sanctification? It was not what he expected. But since it was a gift from the heavens, it had to be real. It was said that if one possessed this thing, then no matter where one was in the Cloud River battlefield, one could use it to create a Primus-level Spirit Spout, which in turn gave birth to a Primus-level Arcane Glade. However, it was only limited to the Cloud River battlefield. For a Spirit Spout to give rise to an Arcane Glade was something unique to the Cloud River battlefield, and such a thing did not exist anywhere else. So, the Wisp of Sanctification could only work in the Cloud River battlefield. Lu Yi grabbed the fat white Wisp of Sanctification, which felt unexpectedly nice in his hand. But how should he store this thing? It seemed to be a living thing, so he wondered whether anything would go wrong if he were to just keep it in his storage bag. After some thought, Lu Yi looked at the small chest in front of him and put the Wisp of Sanctification back before picking up the chest. This chest was also a gift from the heavens. Though he had no idea what material was used to make it, it had to be good stuff, so he brought it along with him. Maybe he could use it to store something else in the future. To his surprise, no matter how much strength he used, he couldn't get the chest to budge. When he tried to move the larger chest next to it, it was the same. The chest couldn't be taken away. Wasn't this too stingy of the heavens? Left with no other choice, Lu Yi took out a spirit beast bag and put the Wisp of Sanctification into it. Storage bags couldn't contain living things, but it was no problem for the spirit beast bag. After collecting the wards from the roster of carnage, Lu Yi moved his mind and left the Vault of Providence. When he came back to his senses, he stood before the Divine Opportunity column with disciples surrounding him, all of them bowing when they saw him open his eyes. Lu Yi responded to their greetings and gave them a few words of encouragement before returning back to the Crimson Blood sect through the Divine Opportunity column. Upon sensing Lu Ye's return, Amber scurried in from the outside and nudged him with its large head. "Where's Yi?" Lu Yi asked. Amber raised its head and gestured in a direction, which told Lu Yi that Yi was cultivating with the sect master. Yi was a spell cultivator, and so was the sect master, so it naturally made it easy for her to receive guidance from him. Compared to Lu Yi, Yi was more like the sect master's final disciple. Rather than disturb them, Lu Yi went straight towards Shui Yuan's residence. When he found Shui Yuan, he took out all the materials he brought from outside, which Shui Yuan was so shocked to see that she could hardly speak. "Again? So many?" The scene in front of her seemed familiar. Just a few months ago, Lu Yi had brought in such a huge amount of supplies, but she didn't think that he would bring another batch back in just a short few months. When Lu Yi entered the Spirit Creek battlefield, he said that he was going to get revenge. But now, rather than revenge, it seemed more like he was going to stock up on resources. She wondered just how the Thousand Demon Ridge was feeling after being extorted by the same guy twice. "Senior sister, things will get better and better for us in the future, so no need to be stingy with your cultivation needs. You and Sect Master are the only two Divine Ocean Realm Masters in the sect, and the Sect Master is growing old, so there are things that he can no longer keep up with. In the future you'll have to watch after the sect more." Shui Yuan nodded. "I understand. Instead of me, you've worked hard out there." Even though she had no idea what Lu Yi had done to make the Thousand Demon Ridge compromise, if she didn't guess wrong, then some fights and killings had to be involved. Otherwise, unless such a large faction was forced to a point of desperation, how could they possibly be willing to compromise? "Take your time organizing the resources, senior sister. I'll be taking my leave." Saying so, Lu Yi took out his spirit artifact and took to the skies, flying towards the summit of bamboos. Looking at the mountain of resources in front of her, Shui Yuan laughed and shook her head. It was going to be another busy but fulfilling day, and the sect's storage was going to be filled to the point of overflowing. In the sleeping chambers of the summit of bamboos, Lu Yi divided the amulets in his hands into two sets. One set with 6 golden amulets was for Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan. There was another set of 5 golden amulets, 1 purple one, a blue one, 2 green ones, as well as 4 white ones. Other than the golden amulets, most of these came to him as spoils of war from when he slaughtered his enemies in the Carnage Colosseum, but there were also those he got from opening amulet caskets. He didn't rush to use these amulets however, since Yi was not around. Once Yi was free they could cultivate together to increase their strength. He continued taking out various flames for the Tree of Glyphs consumption, and as time passed, the leaves on the Tree of Glyphs burned one by one. Lu Yi didn't stop until only 30 flames of earthen spirits were left in his possession. He had to keep some behind for unexpected situations, just in case the Tree of Glyphs ever ran out of fuel again. Then he began checking the glyphs on the leaves. As before, most of the leaves did not carry complete glyphs, but rather special connection techniques that were very useful to Lu Yi. They could be considered the basis and foundation for his advancement in the way of glyphs. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to master the construction of glyphs without knowing how to connect them. Glyphs could be used alone or with the help of wards. If a glyph were activated through a ward, then these connection techniques will have to be used. Strictly speaking, glyphs and wards were complementary to each other. It took Lu Yi almost 3 hours to finish inspecting all the burning leaves. There were 4 new glyphs in total. Moreover, each glyph was more complex than the previous ones as they were carried on not just a single leaf. For example, Lu Ye's first glyphs, Protection and Sharp Edge, were both basic glyphs that were not complicated to construct. A single leaf was enough to carry all their information. However, there were some complicated glyphs that couldn't be contained in just one leaf. For example, Glyph Space was carried by several dozen leaves, and Glyph Fire Phoenix was even more ridiculous. The outline of the leaves that carried it looked just like a fire phoenix crouching on the Tree of Glyphs when linked together. The more difficult the glyphs, the more leaves it had to be carried on. This time he had received 3 types of glyphs, split into leaves as few as 3 or 4 to as many as 7 to 8. This meant that these were much more difficult to construct than basic glyphs like Protection and Sharp Edge. Trap Beast, Mist Shroud, Mirage, Aerial Lock. These were the 4 new glyphs he obtained. Lu Yi had seen every type of these glyphs in books before. Of them, he had used Glyph Trapped Beast in the Carnage Coliseum before. Other than Glyph Void, this was another practical glyph that he learned from a book that was used during fights. The trap ward he set up before was based with Glyph Trapped Beast at its core. In the Carnage Coliseum, he was able to escape the pursuit twice from 9th Order Cloud River Realm experts, so the role that this glyph played was self-evident. However, that was something that he learned from a book. Compared to that which was inspired by the Tree of Glyphs, it was different for Lu Yi. The glyphs he taught himself carried a risk of failure and were not very efficient, but the glyphs on the Tree of Glyphs could be activated at will, and setting up a trap ward with such a glyph would also be more efficient. Glyph Mist Shroud was as its name suggested. It could create a shroud of mist, and the more energy that was poured into it, the denser the mist. This glyph was used specifically for wards. A confusion ward was set up finely enough and supplemented by other techniques, then it could be used to effectively confuse an enemy. Glyph Mirage was similar to Glyph Mist Shroud, but rather than create mist, it created an illusion to confuse reality and falsehood. Similarly, this glyph can also be used as the core of a ward to set up a Mirage ward. If Mist Shroud and Mirage were to be combined, then it would truly become a proper illusion ward. As for Aerial Lock, it was also as its name suggested. It had the ability to prohibit flight in the air, and if used as the core of a ward, it would become an aerial lock ward. These 4 glyphs didn't improve Lu Ye's own strength much, but it offered him more choices in the way of wards. Lu Yi couldn't help but get a strange feeling rising up in him. He had gained 4 glyphs from the Tree of Glyphs last time, but he ended up going farther and farther down the path of a spell cultivator. This time, with the 4 new glyphs he received, he was going farther and farther down the path of a ward cultivator. He wondered what else he would get next time. Chapter 551, Way of Tattoos. After leaving the Summit of Bamboos, he headed straight for the Summit of Clarity. He hadn't visited Lady Yun during this trip back to the sect, and it was also time for him to swap the old books for new ones. He had looked through the books he got from her plenty of times and knew each one like the back of his hand. The Summit of Clarity was as peaceful as always. Even though there were also some disciples in the Crimson Blood sect who could choose to freely enter and leave the sect and its outpost, no one dared tread on the Summit of Clarity lightly, and Lu Yi was the only one who could come at will without prior notice. When he reached the Summit of Clarity, he was brought before Lady Yun by her mute maid. Lu Yi bowed respectfully in greeting. He was very reverent of Lady Yun, and though his entry into the Way of Wards could be said to be due to his possession of the Tree of Glyphs, strictly speaking, Lady Yun was truly the one who led the way forward for him in this path. Though the two were not master and disciple by name, that relationship was their truth. Lady Yun was undoubtedly very pleased with Lu Ye's sense and talent as well, and she even had the idea to take Lu Yi in as her disciple in the past, but that never came to be for various reasons. Even so, Lady Yun never held anything back when it came to teaching Lu Yi, showing no reservation as a true master would to their disciple. Inside the hall, Lady Yun tested Lu Ye's recent progress in the way of glyphs as usual while Lu Yi answered each of her questions and demonstrated his proficiency. Despite receiving no praise from Lady Yun, Lu Yi could tell just from the look in her eyes that she was very satisfied with his growth in the way of wards. Then Lady Yun constructed a complex glyph so that he may try to dispel it, which Lu Yi completed without a hitch. This game where Lu Yi destroyed the glyphs that Lady Yun constructed was a fast way for glyph weavers to learn the structure of certain glyphs. In Lady Yun's words, glyph weavers who could construct glyphs were only drawing a scoop according to the gourd. Only by understanding how to quickly break a particular glyph could one truly attain mastery over that glyph. After the test was over, Lady Yun smiled. You are now qualified to be considered a true glyph weaver. However, humility gains and fullness loses. Remember not to be complacent. Yes, Lu Yi answered respectfully. After some thought, he added, this disciple wishes to learn the way of tattoos from the lady. Oh. Lady Yun was surprised at that. What suddenly spurred you to want to learn tattooing? You have some proficiency in the way of wards, so why not further your attainments in that path instead? Lu Yi answered, naturally this disciple has no intention of abandoning the way of wards, but besides that, this disciple also wishes to delve into the way of tattoos. Right now the sect is developing but it is still young and the disciples are weak. In the future, when they venture out of the Spirit Creek battlefield and into the Cloud River battlefield, they will eventually bump shoulders with others and get into fights. If this disciple can learn the way of tattoos, I can also help tattoo them with glyphs that would provide some help to them. Lady Yun couldn't help but laugh at that. These should be matters that old fart should be mulling over. You need only focus on your own cultivation. Naturally, the old fart was referring to the sect master. Lu Yi insisted, this disciple also wishes to help. Moreover, it doesn't hurt to learn more skills, and even if understanding more things doesn't necessarily bring about any benefits, it couldn't be a bad thing to know more. Lady Yun nodded with a smile. Since you have the heart to learn, then learn you shall. Tattoo artistry is a branch from the art of glyph weaving. Since you have tattoos yourself, you should know what they are. Lu Yi nodded. However, having the ability to construct a glyph doesn't give you the ability to tattoo that glyph on a person's body. It requires fine techniques and control over one's spiritual power. Furthermore, you'll need the help of special materials that are not limited to the blood of various beasts, herbs, and so on. Oftentimes, the materials required for each type of tattoo were also different. Since she agreed to guide Lu Yi in the way of tattoos, Lady Yun began imparting all kinds of knowledge regarding tattoos to Lu Yi. Even if he already knew all this information, Lu Yi still listened seriously. To receive guidance from a top glyph weaver like Lady Yun was a rare and precious opportunity for anyone. And through Lady Yun's teachings, Lu Yi gradually gained a systematic understanding of the way of tattoos. Only then did he realize that the way of tattoos was not as straightforward as he had expected. However, Lu Yi had a unique advantage when it came to his wish of cultivating the way of tattoos. That came in the form of spiritual power control and a powerful mind. No other cultivator at his level should be able to surpass him in these areas. Time gradually went by, and Lady Yun's earnest lecture lasted several hours before coming to an end, where she called out to Lu Yi. Come with me. Lu Yi got up and followed. Soon the two of them arrived at a book storage room. Lady Yun swept her gaze around the room and with a casual gesture, books of varying thicknesses flew off the shelves. There were about a dozen or so books in total which she placed in front of Lu Yi. These are the works of different tattoo artists, each offering their fundamental insights into the way of tattoos. Take your time to look through them and I will teach you more tomorrow. Yes. For Lu Yi, reading was not a chore. Ever since he began practicing the way of glyphs with Lady Yun, he had perused at least hundreds of books on the subject. In the Spirit Creek battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield, as long as he had some free time, he enjoyed studying, and it had become something of a habit for him. Opening one of the books, Lu Yi earnestly read through its contents. Lady Yun had already left. After one whole night, Lu Yi managed to finish the dozen or so books. These works were not exceedingly profound, so they were ready to read, and he also gained valuable insights from them. The next day, Lady Yun went straight to the book storage and continued instructing Lu Yi more on the way of tattoos. The same pattern repeated itself. In the morning, Lady Yun provided Lu Yi with lessons. At night, Lu Yi would immerse himself in reading within the room, days passing by uneventfully. 10 days later, after assessing Lu Yi's theoretical knowledge of the way of tattoos, Lady Yun nodded with satisfaction. You've grasped the fundamentals of the way of tattoos quite well. Now what's left is the practical application. The way of tattoos is all about practice, and it also carries significant risks. This aspect sets it apart from other branches of glyph mastery. Nevertheless, tattooing required leaving a mark on a living being to be effective. If a tattoo artist's technique was not proficient enough or their skill lacked precision, then a failed tattoo could be a minor concern or even cause irreversible harm to the recipient. If that were the case, then it would be troublesome. Before you begin your practicals, you need your own set of tools. Saying so, Lady Yun extended her hand, and a jade box appeared in her palm, which she pushed in front of Lu Yi. This is a set of needles I used in my earlier years. It's been idle for many years, so I'm giving it to you today. Lu Yi respectfully accepted it. Thank you, madam. This gift was of great help to him. Without Lady Yun's gift, he would have had to find a set of needles himself. Perhaps the Vault of Providence might have some for sale, but it would likely cost a significant amount of contributions, and the quality wouldn't compare to the set that Lady Yun had given him. Upon opening the jade box, Lu Yi found it neatly arranged with 49 needles of varying lengths. He picked up one and noticed it was hollow, designed for injecting materials like a concoction of beast blood and herbs. Furthermore, these needles varied not only in length but also in hardness. Some were incredibly rigid, while others were extremely flexible. Each needle had its purpose. When tattoo artists engraved a glyph, multiple needles with different properties were often needed to complete the process. Initially, while practicing tattoos, you should choose simpler glyphs. Through continuous practice, you will become familiar with the techniques, and once your skills are refined, you can move on to more complex tattoos. Understood, Lu Yi responded, but he was curious. But madam, what should I use to practice? Lady Yun gave him a knowing smile. There is only one initial practice subject for a tattoo artist, and that is yourself, of course. Lu Yi's eyelid twitched slightly. He had thought of using some wild beasts or spirit beasts for practice. It's only through working on your own body that you can accurately grasp the essence of tattoos and become better acquainted with the force behind the needles. After all, your body's feedback is the most authentic and clear. At the outset of your practice, don't aim to achieve greatness immediately and try to tattoo a full glyph directly. Instead, start from the basic elements of yin and yang, treating it as if you're learning the way of glyphs again from the beginning. Disciple understands. Smiling, Lady Yun raised her hand, and a jade bottle appeared before Lu Yi. This bottle contains a type of medicinal concoction that you can use for practice. Even if you fail, it won't harm you. After a short while, Lady Yun left. Lu Yi stared at the needles and the bottle before him and pondered for a moment. Then he rolled up his right sleeve to reveal his arm while picking up a needle with his left hand, dipping it into the medicinal concoction, and quickly and decisively pricked his right arm. The technique of needle insertion was already deeply ingrained in him. The process required speed, precision, and stability. At the moment of insertion, he had to inject the material contained in the needle into his body in order to form a primary element. Each needle could only form a single element, meaning the more intricate a glyph was, the more jabs were required. To control one's mental focus and spiritual power was undoubtedly a significant challenge. On the first needle prick, he failed, unsurprisingly. Activating spiritual power to construct yin and yang was relatively easy for Lu Yi, but constructing yin and yang with a needle was an entirely different level of difficulty. Lady Yun's suggestion to treat it as a new beginning in cultivating the way of glyph was not without merit. Lu Yi felt like a novice exploring glyphs for the first time, and he had to start from scratch in every aspect. The first time was a failure, the second time was a failure, then a third, a fourth. Little fine needle holes were constantly appearing on Lu Yi's right arm. Through the holes, a faint purple color could be seen, which was the color of the medicinal concoction. 2 hours later, as Lu Yi pricked the needle into his body, a complete primary element was finally constructed. He raised an eyebrow and immediately dipped the needle again to continue the next attempt. Chapter 552 Fourth Order Cloud River Realm. With constant practice, there was no longer skin on his right arm that had not been pricked by a needle, so Lu Yi moved to his thigh. Once those were also covered in holes, he moved to his abdomen. He had a strong body, so petty injuries like this would not affect him much. After just one night of rest he could continue his practice again. Due to the purple concoction, however, his body was covered in a purple color. His skill grew little by little at a visible rate, allowing Lu Yi to tattoo more and more primary elements. In 2 days he was able to tattoo Glyph 9. This type of numbered glyph was the most simple type of glyph constructed with only 9 primary elements, but even though it was a glyph, it didn't serve any special function and was used by new glyph weavers to practice. Lu Yi had practiced these before, but this time he was practicing them again in the form of tattoos, so the difficulty was undoubtedly much greater than before. After a first successful experience, Lu Yi had undoubtedly gained a deeper understanding of the way of tattoos. As time passed, the glyphs that Lu Yi could tattoo became more and more complex, and he had to say that tattoos truly did drain the mind a great deal. Right now, the glyphs that he could tattoo were only the most basic ones. Glyphs such as Void consisted of as many as 3,000 primary elements, which would equate to 3,000 jabs in total, during which he couldn't make any mistakes or pause in any way. He had to complete all 3,000 at one go, which would be difficult for one to hold on if their mental power was lacking. In the blink of an eye, inside the study several days later, following the last prick on his skin, a tattoo formed on Lu Ye's right arm. This tattoo was not a numerical glyph, but glyph, sharp edge, which he obtained from the tree of glyphs at the very beginning. The shape of the glyph was just like an arrow. Being able to tattoo a practical glyph such as this one was undoubtable proof that Lu Yi had made it past the threshold in the way of tattoos. Now the only thing left to do was keep on practicing to accumulate experience. However, since the tattoo was made entirely out of a medicinal concoction, it was not powerful enough to exert strength. If a suitable mixture of animal blood and herbal juices were used, then it would truly become a real tattoo, and if spiritual power were poured into it, the glyph would be able to bring about a sharpening power. He breathed a long sigh of relief. It wasn't until this moment that Lu Yi finally felt a trace of fatigue. It had been more than half a month since he entered the Summit of Clarity, and he hadn't rested at all during this time. Even if he had a strong body, it was not strange for him to not be able to hold up any longer. It was time for him to bid farewell to Lady Yun. To a cultivator, enhancing one's cultivation realm was the most important thing for them. The way of glyphs was just an embellishment in the path of becoming stronger. Lu Yi had the talent and foundation, but he would not concentrate on the trifles and neglect the essentials simply because of this. He took out the books he had finished reading from his storage sphere and placed them back on the bookshelf, then he looked for some books he hadn't read before and stored them away. Most of the books he chose this time were related to the way of tattoos. Since he had learnt the way of tattoos from Lady Yun, he would naturally make more effort on it in his spare time in the future. He walked out of the book room and left to see Lady Yun. Knowing the purpose of his visit, Lady Yun did not make him stay and only taught him a little more on the way of tattoos before letting him go. Lu Yi bowed and thanked her. After not seeing the sun for more than half a month, Lu Yi couldn't help but squint as the sunlight washed over him. Returning to the summit of bamboos, he took a bath before changing into a clean set of clothes. Then Lu Yi fell into a deep sleep. After cultivating to the Cloud River realm, his need for sleep had become very low. When cultivators meditated, they were, in fact, in a state of semi-rest, and as long as the efficiency of their cultivation was high enough, they would come out of the session full of energy. However, it was human nature to eat and sleep. This was a truth that even the most advanced of cultivators could not erase. Lu Yi was eventually woken up by a wet tongue. When he opened his eyes, he saw Amber's head right in front of his face, its large tongue lapping happily at his face. After pushing it away, Lu Yi sat up. He had no idea how long he slept for, but the exhaustion had been cleared from his body, restoring him to a refreshed mood. Fragrance of freshly prepared food wafted in from the outside, and when Lu Yi walked out of curiosity, he found the table covered in rice and dishes that were still fresh and steaming. The door had been opened, and Yi walked in with another dish in hand. Upon seeing Lu Yi, she exclaimed in surprise, "Finally awake?" Lu Yi answered with a hum before sitting down at the table, grabbing a pair of chopsticks and digging in. He was surprised. "Did you make this?" Yi giggled. "It was second senior sister who made it, I just delivered them." He was wondering why the taste was completely the same as second senior sister's cooking. On second thought, Yi didn't even have this skill set to begin with. While eating, he chatted idly with Yi, and it didn't take long for Lu Yi to scarf down the table full of food. After eating his fill, he left Yi to clean up the table while he went out to exercise his body. After an hour, back in the hall, Lu Yi and Yi sat opposite each other while Amber sat between the two of them. "I'm starting now," Lu Yi said to her. Yi responded in excitement. I'm ready. Lu Yi laughed and brought out his share of the amulets, then casually crushed one of the white ones. A white spiral emerged from which pure spiritual power poured out in a dense, unscattered form, lingering around the two cultivators and the tiger. Just by breathing, they could take that energy into their bodies and use it to strengthen themselves. White amulets did not hold up for long, and it disappeared completely in less than an incense stick of time. Then Lu Yi picked up another. Once the white amulets were exhausted, he started on the green ones, and once those were done he went into the blues, then the purples, before finally moving on to the 5 golden amulets. As the effects of the second golden amulet were about to deplete, Lu Yi distinctly felt the river of his spiritual power reaching a limit inside him, giving rise to that familiar sensation of fullness once again. This was the sign of a breakthrough. Previously, when he returned from the myriad beast domain, he had broken through into the third order and even moved slightly further beyond that. Later, he also obtained a purple amulet from Xia Qianqian. Coupled with days of consuming spirit pills, he was now not far from reaching the fourth order. Now, breaking through was just a natural progression. More power was being consumed and refined as it flowed into his body, enhancing the volume of his river of spiritual power. Until a certain moment, Lu Yi felt a surge in his river of spiritual power. Right after, that sense of fullness suddenly disappeared as if something had been shattered, replaced by an indescribable sense of contentment. A wave of energy surged in all directions. He had advanced into the fourth order Cloud River realm. In comparison to his previous advancement, going from the third order to the fourth order undoubtedly took longer, primarily due to the recent distractions. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been delayed this much. If he had possessed cultivation at the level of the fourth order Cloud River realm during his time at the Carnage Colosseum, then slaying the seventh order He Bing would not have been so troublesome. However, Lu Yi was reluctant to use his amulets to enhance his strength in the Carnage Colosseum, as a single golden amulet could last for a full day and night. It would be a waste if he encountered enemies during that process. Almost simultaneous with his advancement into the fourth order Cloud River realm, Yi and Amber also experienced changes. A sudden flash of light emerged on the surface of Yi's body, and Amber's vitality surged for an instant. Clearly they had also made a breakthrough. However, Yi was an apparition and Amber was a spirit beast, which made it difficult to define their progress by cultivation realms. Still, judging by the fluctuations in their spiritual power, they had undoubtedly entered the second order of the Cloud River realm. There were still 3 golden amulets remaining, so they continued cultivating. 3 days later, all the amulets had been consumed. None of them experienced another breakthrough during that period. Lu Yi was still in the fourth order, but after consuming 3 golden amulets, he had accumulated considerable progress within his new minor realm. As for Amber and Yi, they were on the brink of teaching the third order. With a bit more dedicated cultivation, they should be able to make a breakthrough. As his cultivation advanced, resource consumption grew. Naturally, the more amulets he could get, the better. The amulets that Lu Yi acquired had to be shared with both Yi and Amber. Fortunately, he wasn't very demanding when it came to his cultivation environment. While a favorable environment was beneficial, it wasn't essential. He just had to consume spirit pills. This advantage was something most cultivators couldn't hope to gain. Several days had passed since his agreed-upon 1-month deadline with Li Baxian, so it was time to return to the Cloud River battlefield to meet with him. Even though he had 6 golden amulets left, he had to hand them over to his 4th senior brother and Feng Yuechan. After all, those were their possessions. There was still that Primus-level wisp of sanctification that he had to place in a suitable location in the Cloud River battlefield. While Lu Yi wasn't so needy with his conditions, the same couldn't be said for Yi, not to mention his 4th senior brother and Feng Yueshan, as well as Zhu Jia. Thinking of Zhu Jia, Lu Yi's eyes couldn't help but twitch. The last time he had been in contact with Zhu Jia was nearly 2 months ago. At that time, Zhu Jia had gotten lost in the Cloud River battlefield, so Lu Yi instructed him to wait in a certain location. After so much time had passed, he had no idea how Zhu Jia was faring. Speaking of which, he had been in the Carnage Colosseum for almost 20 days, and Zhu Jia hadn't reached out to him. After tidying up a bit, Lu Yi left the Summit of Bamboos with Amber and Yi, quickly arriving at the Summit of Fortitude. He met with Shui Yuan and informed her of his intention to enter the Cloud River battlefield, which Shui Yuan did not oppose, only cautioning him to be careful. After all, for cultivators in the Cloud River realm, training in the Cloud River battlefield was the fastest way to advance, as it was the only place to obtain amulets. After bidding farewell to Shui Yuan, Lu Yi headed straight to the Sanctum of Providence. He pressed his hand on the Divine Opportunity column, then connected his consciousness to the Cloud River battlefield. In the next instant, a vast array of lights appeared in his consciousness. Each light represented a divine opportunity column. Lu Yi could freely choose a light to enter the location of the respective divine opportunity column. Last time, it was through this method that he arrived directly in a divine trade association. However, amid the myriad of lights, one light was particularly distinct. While the others were white, this light was uniquely blue. After a brief thought, Lu Yi realized that the blue light represented the divine opportunity column he had called forth at the Carnage Colosseum. Chapter 553, Reentering the Cloud River Battlefield? The divine opportunity columns summoned with the use of a cultivator's contribution points could only be used by the ones who summoned them and anyone with their permission. Other people were unable to use that particular column. So, even though the divine opportunity column in the Carnage Colosseum was worth 100,000 contributions, it was nothing more than abandoned waste in the end. He hadn't agreed with Li Baxin on a meeting place, but Lu Yi had a feeling that he would be waiting near the Carnage Colosseum. So, after just a moment of thought, Lu Yi picked the blue light dot. As his vision distorted, his body grew light. In the blink of an eye, his figure disappeared from the sanctum of Providence. In the Cloud River battlefield, where the Carnage Colosseum was, Lu Yi appeared before the divine opportunity column and immediately began looking around his surroundings. Nothing seemed out of place here. This place was bustling more than a month ago, but as the Carnage Colosseum had been closed for such a long amount of time, there were naturally no more cultivators hanging about this area. However, Lu Yi could still spot traces of a large battle in his surroundings, especially where Lu Yi used Glyph, Fire Phoenix. The ground there was scorched, showing the intensity of the battle that went on that day. Lu Yi pressed on his battlefield imprint and sent out a message. "Fourth senior brother, I've returned." It wasn't long before he received Li Baxin's reply. Just as Lu Yi guessed, Li Baxin and Feng Yueshan did not head far. Since they did not agree on a meeting place beforehand, the two of them had been training within a radius of around 500 kilometers from here while they waited for Lu Ye's return. They conversed briefly and chose to meet up at the nearby Divine Trade Association. Then Lu Yi messaged Zhu Jia. It was a brief message stating, "Location. Atop a certain spirit peak, a large figure resembling a large statue sat on the ground, traces of dust and frost over its body. The area where it sat was practically covered in fallen leaves. The large figure did not breathe and its aura was extremely dim. There also seemed to be hardly any vitality flowing out of it. Even if someone did walk by it, they would only assume that it was a dead man." After sitting here for more than 2 months, Zhu Jia had entered a state of stillness. After receiving Lu Ye's message to wait there, he had obediently kept still until now. He did not even feel the time passing by. It wasn't until he felt a reaction from his battlefield imprint that Zhu Jia slowly opened his eyes to check on it. Leaves trickled down as he moved, and 2 birds that were nesting on his head flapped their wings and flew away. Zhu Jia scratched his head and caught a bird's nest from the top of it. Seemingly finding it a shame to destroy it, he put it back on his head after some thought. Zhu Jia was confused when Lu Yi asked him for his location, but he gave him his current position anyway. On the other end, when Lu Yi saw Zhu Jia's response, he was stunned, the reason being that the location he was in was exactly the same as the one he gave him nearly 2 months ago. "You never moved?" "Nope. Wait there for me." "Okay." It wasn't until Zhu Jia ended the conversation with Lu Yi that he noticed the changes in his environment. Looking around, he saw giant wolves the size of calves either squatting or standing in all directions, their beast eyes staring intently at him. Their numbers were quite large and there seemed to be at least hundreds of them. Any other cultivator would be shocked to encounter such a thing, but Zhu Jia only froze for a moment since he didn't see any malice in the eyes of those wolves, but a more human sense of surprise and curiosity. These giant wolves seemed to be surprised that Zhu Jia was alive. After all, Zhu Jia had not moved for nearly 2 months, nor did he show any clear signs of vitality. None of the wolves expected him to be a living thing. After watching them for a moment, Zhu Jia shut his eyes again and soon entered the same bizarrely still state. He didn't feel any sense of crisis being surrounded by such a large pack of wolves. In his mind, if the other party didn't harbor any malicious intent towards him, then it didn't matter. What was more, even if the wolves were going to gang up on him, he wasn't without the power to defend himself. Seeing that Zhu Jia had fallen silent again, the wolves that were in a bit of commotion calmed down as well, and a while later, one of them went up to Wuxia and sniffed him carefully as if to ascertain whether this guy in front of him was actually alive or dead. Eventually it walked away in confusion. As night fell, the bright moon and sparse stars appeared in the sky. As he was enveloped by the moonlight, a milky glow suddenly appeared on Wuxia's body. That light seemed to have a strange resonance with the moon in the sky, drawing the moon into pouring down its essence. As far as the eye could see, moon essence surged incessantly on the large spirit peak, bathing it in that milky white glow, giving the spirit peak an extremely sacred appearance. Wuxia could cultivate through breathing moon essence in and out, something which Lu Yi had long known. Amber had also followed along with Wuxia to cultivate in the same way, and according to Yi's observation, Amber gained a lot out of it. It was just a pity that they never saw each other again since leaving the Spirit Creek battlefield. This pack of wolves were drawn to the Spirit Peak due to the strange occurrences that happened every night. If Amber could benefit from cultivating with Wuxia, then so could these wolves. The wolves had been aware of Wuxia's presence 5 days since he ended up here, but spirit beasts were simple-minded. Whether Wuxia was dead or alive, it was an existence that could bring about great benefit to them, so even when Wuxia woke up, the wolves did not show him the slightest hint of malice. In their minds, Wuxia was equivalent to a divine relic to their pack, something that could make them grow stronger at a rapid rate, and that was why they stayed here the whole time. As the essence of the moon poured down, each wolf instinctively raised and breathed the essence in. As the moon rose into the sky, the anomaly on the spirit peak became even clearer. But the wolves weren't the only ones attracted by the scene. Other spirit beasts were present too. Spirit beasts were strongly territorial, so such a relic that could enhance the strength of one's tribe had long been regarded by the wolf pack as their forbidden possession that other spirit beasts were not to lay their hands on. So, on almost every moonlit night, the wolves fought with the other spirit beasts that were attracted to the area, and it was through these fights that the wolves established their monopoly over this territory. Wuxia was completely unaware of these goings-on. He always thought that he was just taking a short break. At the Divine Trade Association in a guest room, Lu Yi was cultivating while reading. When a knock came at the door, Yi got up to open it. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan, who wore masks of a boy and a girl, arrived together. Lu Yi got up to greet them. Taking off his mask, Li Baxian had a look of shame on his face. "Little junior brother, you have truly suffered in the Carnage Coliseum, and as your senior brother, I wasn't able to do anything to help. For that I'm ashamed." During this period of time, every time he recalled what happened in the Carnage Coliseum, Li Baxian would feel himself racked with guilt. Fortunately, however, Lu Yi had a strong heritage and the favor of the heavens, so he was still able to escape from that desperate situation at the very end. Lu Yi reassured him. "Don't beat yourself up over it, senior brother. When I was being hunted down, I'd received aid from many of the Grand Sky Coalition's experts. If it weren't for senior brother's connections, then I wouldn't have been able to hold out until the end." Li Baxian sighed. In the end, it's most important for one to be strong themselves. In the Spirit Creek battlefield, he and Feng Yuechan dominated for many years, but upon arriving at the Cloud River battlefield, the fame of their past did not bring them any conveniences, but instead brought them danger, something which he couldn't help but sigh at. And how could it be any different for Lu Yi? Before the Carnage Coliseum, he didn't have too many worries walking about in the Cloud River battlefield, but after the incident he was sure that the Thousand Demon Ridge would spare no effort in finding out where he was and to hunt him down again. In the future, his situation in the Cloud River battlefield may not be as peaceful as before. Next to them, Feng Yuechan advised, "Strength will grow bit by bit, so there's no need to rush. Compared to others, our cultivation levels have already been rising quickly." Senior sister Feng is right. Lu Yi invited the two to sit down whilst Yi poured them cups of tea. Only then did he bring out the 6 golden amulets and pushed it to the two of them. "These are for senior brother and senior sister Feng. I've already used my share." Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan did not refuse the amulets and stored them away. With these golden amulets, they would be able to make a breakthrough into the 5th order in a short amount of time. Such a speed in cultivation could not be described as slow by any means, and with both of them in the 5th order, even if they were to bump into a 7th order cultivator in the future, they may not be any match for them. Lu Yi also took out his spirit beast bag and took out the fat white Primus-level wisp of sanctification from it. So this is the Primus-level wisp of sanctification? Other than Lu Yi, everyone present couldn't help but look at the object in curiosity as it was their first time seeing it. Yi went forward and gave it a poke, causing the wisp of sanctification to curl up in response. "It's still alive?" Feng Yuechan was astonished. What do you think, senior brother? Should we use this wisp of sanctification ourselves or should we sell it? Lu Yi asked. Li Baxin pondered for a while before responding. If we sell it, then we certainly wouldn't have to worry about finding a buyer. However, we don't really have much of a need for idle resources. If we were to trade it for amulets, then we aren't sure how much a Primus-level wisp of sanctification is worth either. Moreover, other people may not be able to gather enough amulets for it within a short amount of time. Right now, all of us are in the Fourth Order, so we'll be here in the Cloud River battlefield for a long time. If we can have our own arcane glade, then our cultivation would become more efficient. Lu Yi nodded. I think so too. Instead of selling the Primus-level wisp of sanctification for some amulets, it would be better to use it themselves. Furthermore, even if they were to ascend into the real lake realm in the future and left the Cloud River battlefield, the Primus-level arcane glade that was left behind could be passed on to the other disciples of their sect. In the Cloud River battlefield, there were many such arcane glades that had been passed down for generations, all of which were the exclusive domains of each sect. But if we really want to use it for ourselves, then there are some issues that have to be resolved, the largest one being the location of the arcane glade. Li Baxin slowly spoke up. With a Primus-level wisp of sanctification, then as long as one was in the Cloud River battlefield, one could create a Primus-level arcane glade anywhere, but if one did not choose the location well, then they would surely meet with a lot of trouble in the future. Firstly, they had to make sure that it was well hidden. However, for high-flying Cloud River realm cultivators, where could one find a hidden place to begin with? Unless it was some forbidden area that some cultivators dared not tread into, like the Myriad Poison Forest or the burning lands of the Spirit Creek battlefield. Even Lu Ye's wards could not guarantee much. Back then they had a tertiary-level arcane glade, and Lu Yi had also left wards behind when he left. In the end, it had still been breached and his wisp of sanctification had been plundered. Chapter 554, Grand Wild's Peak. So, for them, if they were going to use this Primus-level wisp of sanctification, the first issue that had to be resolved was where the arcane glade was going to be located. After all, their cultivation levels could not be said to be high, and with this level of strength, it wouldn't matter if they were simply occupying a tertiary-level arcane glade, as it wouldn't attract too many covetous eyes, but things were very different when it came to occupying a Primus-level arcane glade. Once it was found out by an outsider, trouble would surely be stirred. Moreover, all three of them had prickly identities, characters that the Thousand Demon Ridge faction wanted to eliminate. Once the matter of the three of them owning an arcane glade was revealed, it would inevitably attract a large number of cultivators from that faction to attack them. Not to mention saving the arcane glade, they couldn't even guarantee their own safety then. I'll come up with an idea for the location, Li Baxin said. He had been in the Cloud River battlefield longer than Lu Yi, and his connections were also much vaster when compared to Lu Ye's, so he was the best person to leave this matter to. In that case, I'll be troubling you on that, senior brother. Feng Yuechan suggested. This Primus-level wisp of sanctification should create a small arcane glade, but even so, it's still an arcane glade that can accommodate 5 people. Currently we have 4 people. If junior brother Lu has any candidates for a 5th person, then bring them over. Otherwise that empty spot would go to waste. As for candidates, I have another person on my side. He turned towards Li Baxin. Senior brother, do you still remember Wuxia? Feng Yuechan had never seen him before, but Li Baxin had, but they hadn't had too many chances to get to know each other. After some contemplation he remembered who he was. That body-tempering cultivator? Him exactly. He came to the Cloud River battlefield a few months earlier than me, and I was going to look for him before heading into the Carnage Coliseum, but I was held up by what happened there and didn't get the chance to meet up with him even until today. Li Baxin nodded. His physique seems a little unusual. Little junior brother has good eyes. In that case, tell him to come join us, then we'll have exactly 5 people. And among the 5 of them, they had 1 body-tempering cultivator, 1 combat cultivator, 1 sword cultivator, and 2 spell cultivators, which was a very sensible party. If they encountered any trouble in the future, they should be able to deal with it with their combined strength. Lu Yi sighed. Wuxia seems to be bad with directions. Previously, when I asked him to join me, he got lost in a deep forest, so I asked him to wait there for me, so I need to go find him. Li Baxin was dumbfounded. To think such a thing could happen. It was hard to imagine how a large guy like Wuxia could get lost in the Cloud River battlefield, but it was inevitable for some special people to exist in this world who could not be judged by common sense. Then, while junior brother Lu is looking for junior brother Jia, senior brother and I can cultivate here with the amulets, and we can go and look for a place for the Wisp of Sanctification later. We'll contact each other again once we have any ideas. That sounds good. Lu Yi nodded in agreement. After their discussion, Lu Yi didn't stick around since Jia had been waiting for him for nearly 2 months. He wasn't sure whether he was getting impatient or not. A few moments later, in front of the Divine Trade Association, Lu Yi stepped out and summoned his flight-type artifact to take him into the air, then he followed the directions that Jia had given him previously. Checking the 10-point map, Jia's current location seemed to be in the middle of a mountain range called the Grand Wilds Peak, and from the map, this Grand Wilds Peak seemed to occupy an extremely large area. Moreover, the core area was marked with one very eye-catching word, elite. This meant that an elite-level spirit beast was living in the depths of this Grand Wilds Peak. Elite was not a realm, but rather a title of extreme strength. The elite-level spirit beasts of the Spirit Creek battlefield have reached the limits of what the Spirit Creek battlefield could hold. The same was true of the Cloud River battlefield. Elite-level spirit beasts had reached the maximum of what the Cloud River battlefield could hold. But the two were vastly different in strength, naturally so as they were in different realms. Generally speaking, any place where an elite-level spirit beast took residence in was basically a forbidden area for cultivators. No cultivator was willing to trespass on the territory of an elite-level spirit beast unless they were sick of living. This was also the reason why Lu Yi was able to establish his dominance as a cultivator, leaving a huge impact on the hearts of the Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators. No other cultivator had ever achieved such a feat in the Spirit Creek battlefield since the beginning of time, not even Feng Yuechan, who dominated the role of supremacy for over a decade. The fact that an elite-level spirit beast lay at the very core of Grand Wilds Peak meant undoubtedly that this was not a good place. Many spirit beasts were sure to be living in a deep forest such as this, and the deeper one trod into the mountainous wildernesses, the more dangers there would be. The Grand Wilds Peak was not very close, so even with Lu Ye's current speed, it would still take him 10 days to arrive. Luckily, the journey wasn't too boring with Yi and Amber to accompany him, and he could take turns controlling the flight-type artifact with Yi in day-night shifts. That way they could shorten the journey by almost half. The journey was uneventful as they flew along, enjoying the unique scenery provided by the Cloud River battlefield. Occasionally they would encounter some cultivators, but most of them wouldn't disturb them. For the few that were eager to cause trouble due to their high cultivation level or those with a large group, Lu Yi avoided them in advance or used Glyph, Soar to escape. With his current 4th order cultivation, as long as he didn't catch the attention of experts at the 8th or 9th order that wouldn't stop chasing after him, then there wouldn't be any danger. There were a considerable number of 8th and 9th order experts in the Cloud River battlefield, but no one would chase after a cultivator that they didn't know the faction of for no reason. While rushing on his way, Lu Yi didn't forget to swallow some pills and cultivate. 6 days passed by in a flash in that manner, and a travel-worn Lu Yi entered the Grand Wilds Peak, where he got into contact with Jia once more to confirm his exact location. When he matched it to the 10-point map, Lu Ye's brows were raised. Jia was quite the courageous sort, for he was not in the outer periphery of the Grand Wilds Peak's radius, but deeper inside. He wondered whether he had encountered any dangers after being there for so long. However, with that guy's special physique and thick skin, he had self-preservation capabilities that Lu Yi couldn't hope to match, so there was no need for him to worry about his safety. A considerable number of cultivators seemed to come in and out of the Grand Wilds Peak, generally in groups, but there were the occasional few loners. This place was a paradise for spirit beasts. There were about 7 or 8 such places scattered in the Cloud River battlefield, places where spirit beasts gathered in large numbers, and these places were naturally a hotspot for cultivators. Cultivators could hunt spirit beasts and gather some treasure so they can be exchanged for cultivation resources. Even though cultivators of major sects received a salary each month, it was not enough to support one's cultivation. The reason for that was not because the sects were stingy. Instead, there was a reason for doing so. If that monthly salary that the sects paid out were enough to satisfy the needs of each cultivator, then there would be no need for them to gain experience or adventure, which would be detrimental to one's growth. So, no matter how prosperous a sect was, they would never grant their disciples a salary that met all their cultivation needs, and the more powerful the sect, the more stringent they were. That way they could promote independent habits in their disciples. Lu Yi did have sufficient cultivation resources. Even without entering the Cloud River battlefield, he could still raise the level of his cultivation through consuming spirit pills and consuming at the main sect. However, there wasn't much of a point in growing this way. Only by going through constant trials and tribulations could a cultivator have strength matching their realms. Simply growing one's cultivation level would only lead to superficial growth. It hadn't been more than half a day that Lu Yi entered the Grand Wild's peak, and he could already feel the aftershocks from several battles around him. Clearly, they were from the battles of cultivators who were hunting the spirit beasts. He watched the battles from afar and found that the cultivators worked together well. They had members keeping a lookout on their surroundings, a vanguard and a flank. With this division of labor, as long as they chose the right opponents, it wouldn't take long for them to finish the battle and gain some loot. He also came across several scattered spirit beasts on the way. They weren't that strong, so with Yi and Amber's help, they were able to kill them easily. He collected the beast blood, mutant cores, and some other useful items from the spirit beast just in case. During his time in the Spirit Creek realm, Lu Yi had also hunted some spirit beasts, but the loot from those spirit beasts weren't worth much, so he didn't even waste the energy collecting them. However, things were different now that he was in the Cloud River realm. Without even mentioning the rest, the mutant cores found in the bodies of Cloud River realm spirit beasts alone were a favorite of Amber's when he left the Divine Trade Association. He had even spent some contribution points on mutant cores and left them in Amber's storage bag for it to snack on. Moreover, the blood of the spirit beasts could be useful in the way of tattoos. As for the rest of the materials, some of them could be used for pill refining, others could be used for artificing, and so on. The role that these materials could play would depend on whose hands they fell into. The deeper they went into the mountain range, the stronger the spirit beasts they encountered. On the contrary, the number of cultivators appeared to be fewer and fewer. If the outermost region of the Grand Wild's peak could be said to be a training ground suitable for any Cloud River realm cultivator, then where Lu Yi was currently at was a dangerous place where one could not ascertain their safety unless they were in the Fifth Order at the very least. After reaching this place, Lu Yi didn't dare to fly recklessly in the sky either, since there were plenty of flying spirit beasts in this damned place. If he bumped into some of them in the air, then it would end in a difficult situation for him. He really couldn't understand why Zhu Jia had come to such a deep place in this mountain range when he had merely gotten lost. Once he found him, he would have to give him a good talking to stop him from simply stepping into dangerous places like these in the future. As night fell, Lu Yi was about to look for a hidden place to recover his energy when he suddenly felt something in his heart that caused him to turn his head in a certain direction. There seemed to be some noise coming from that direction. It was the sound of people talking, and there seemed to be a lot of them. After pondering for a moment, he put Amber into his spirit beast bag while he hid himself with Glyph concealment, then he slowly crept in that direction. Within a few moments, a clearing appeared before his eyes where at least 30 to 40 cultivators were gathered. Some were alone while others were in groups of 3 or 5, but he had no idea what they were here for. However, as many of them sat cross-legged and cultivating to recover their strength, it seemed like they were getting ready for some sort of operation. There were so many people gathered here that it was clear they were not of the same clan. Some were not even from the same faction, and there were also those that were injured. Chapter 555, Birth of an Exotic Treasure? On the outskirts of the clearing, Lu Yi was lurking in hiding, silently observing them. He still had no idea what these people were gathered here for, and since he didn't know where they came from, he couldn't simply reveal himself. However, one after another, more cultivators came in from all directions, entering the clearing. Seeing this, Lu Yi thought for a moment before lifting the concealment glyph and walking forward. Several eyes swept to him, but they soon looked away. Lu Yi wore a mask that concealed his appearance, and he had put Amber into the spirit beast bag ahead of time. So, even if some of them felt that he was hiding his face but showing his tail, they wouldn't think much of it. Not every cultivator chose to act like this, but there were plenty of people who wore masks on the battlefield. He casually found a corner to sit down on, seemingly emulating what they were doing while silently paying attention to the movements around him. Soon enough, he managed to glean some information from the cultivators' conversations, but they spoke too vaguely, so he could only deduce that some sort of exotic treasure existed in the vicinity. Every night, a strange anomaly would appear, and these people were gathered here because they wanted to seize the treasure. Unfortunately, the place where the exotic treasure was located was extremely dangerous. Many powerful spirit beasts convened in that area, so even if these cultivators had been working hard for many days, none had been able to find out just what that exotic treasure was. Lu Yi had heard stories about exotic treasures coming into being before, and it could be considered a chance encounter, but exotic treasure that could give rise to visions were rare. Under normal circumstances, They had to be extremely precious objects, so it was no wonder so many cultivators had been attracted to this place. This was only what Lu Yi could see. There could be even more cultivators gathered around the area. After finding out the purpose of the people gathered here, Lu Yi lost interest. He had come to look for Jujia after all. Even though exotic treasures were good things, for so many cultivators to have failed to get their hands on it after so many days, even Lu Yi did not believe that he would have much hope of obtaining it. With such thoughts, Lu Yi moved to leave. However, at that moment a shout arose. "It's starting." As soon as he said that, the cultivators here got up and swept into the air, all of them looking in a certain direction. Lu Yi also turned to look in the direction they were focused on, where he saw moon essence pouring down from the sky like a pillar atop a spirit peak that was barely visible from his field of view. The entire spirit peak was covered in a majestic and hazy moonlight that made it give off a divine aura. It's a vision of the heavens. Sure enough, an exotic treasure must have appeared. Someone exclaimed, a look of anticipation and joy in his eyes. Exotic treasures that could give rise to visible phenomena were no trivial things. If any Cloud River Realm cultivator could get their hands on them, then even if they didn't choose to use it themselves, they could trade them for a large amount of resources with other cultivators. The exotic treasure must have some sort of powerful attraction for the spirit beast. A large number of them gather in that direction every night where the moonlight can be seen, where they slaughter each other, and it seems like it's the same tonight. It's a pity that no one has been able to see just what that exotic treasure is so far. On the contrary, a lot of people have lost their lives over there. When we do decide to act later, we'll have to work together. At the very least, we should find out just what sort of exotic treasure it is. What this fellow cultivator said is very true. Sentence by sentence, their intentions entered Lu Ye's ears. Staring fixedly in the direction of that phenomenon, Lu Yi frowned. The same. Why did it seem so familiar to him? He couldn't help but recall the time when Amber cultivated under the moon with Jujia during their time in the Heavenly Derivative sect. Comparatively speaking, what he was seeing now was slightly more magnificent than what he saw that day. Suddenly, Lu Yi had a bad feeling in his heart. With that thought, he quickly sent a message to Jujia. It wasn't long before he received a response, and after some thought, Lu Yi gave him some instructions. In the next moment, the moon essence poured down onto the peak and the various phenomenons disappeared without a trace. Lu Ye's eyelid twitched. He understood at once that it was just as he suspected. It wasn't the sign of some exotic treasure being born in the world, it was just Jujia cultivating. For a Cloud River Realm cultivator to have created such a fuss during cultivation, and even attracting so many cultivators to investigate, there was truly nobody who could achieve this but him. Just as Lu Yi was being sardonic, the disappearance of the phenomenon caused the faces of many cultivators to change. Did someone get their hands on it? If it wasn't so, then there was no way that the vision could have disappeared for no reason. At those words, many cultivators became anxious and all rushed towards the spirit peak at once. At the same time, growls could be heard coming from the direction of the spirit peak, accompanied by turbulent spiritual power fluctuations. Under the moonlight, many flying spirit beasts danced in the air while colorful lights bloomed. Before the cultivators could even get close, the spirit beasts over there had already begun fighting due to the disappearance of the phenomenon. For many cultivators, such a scene was not surprising, for the spirit beasts over there would fight chaotically on every moonlit night. Many powerful spirit beasts had already died near the spirit peak. Then wolf howls could be heard, gradually drowning out the noise of the other beasts. Lu Yi hovered in midair, staring fixedly in the direction of the spirit peak. There were no longer any cultivators that could be seen around him, which was quite a headache. The phenomenon had come about from Jujia's cultivation, and not only did it attract the attention of many cultivators, it also caused the many spirit beasts gathered there to fight incessantly. It wasn't hard to imagine just how chaotic it was over there. Naturally, Jujia wasn't in a good situation. After pondering for a while, Lu Yi quickly flew off into that direction. Before he could get close, however, a huge shadow descended from the sky. Along with it, a thunderbolt resembling a swimming dragon struck down. It was a storming thunderhawk that attacked him, and judging by the power of its attack, it was a spirit beast equivalent to the 8th Order Cloud River Realm. Lu Yi would not dare to take on such a ferocious blow and immediately lowered his spirit boat while swerving side by side. However, the thunder chased after him as if it were a living creature. Once he reached the ground, he unsheathed his inviolable saber and slashed at the incoming thunder. The impact of that clash caused Lu Yi to fly backwards as the power of the thunder traveled through his body, causing him to feel numb for a while. After barely stabilizing his feet, the Thunderhawk struck again. Lu Yi raised his hand and launched out several blade lights to interrupt the Thunderhawk while jumping in the other direction. A fishy stench lingered around his nose, and at the same time, a large cloud of smoke rose from the tree of Glyphs. A strong gust of wind struck from behind. Lu Yi quickly turned to his side to avoid it, where a long but robust figure entered his vision and dashed past him. It was a venomous python that had been lying in ambush. Its intention was to launch a sneak attack on Lu Yi, but he managed to evade it. So, seizing the opportunity, it launched itself towards the Thunderhawk instead. In an instant, two massive spirit beasts were engaged in combat. The hawk's cries and the python's hisses filled the air. After a moment, the Thunderhawk soared high into the sky, its sharp claws piercing the flesh of the venomous python while the snake coiled around its body. Lu Yi was left laying there watching the scene with cold sweat running down his back. The scene was incredibly messy. Spirit beasts of various species clashed in frenzied battles, joined by other cultivators as well. Everything within a radius of 500 kilometers was overrun by chaos. After walking just 5 kilometers, Lu Yi had already encountered several life-threatening situations. He even witnessed a cultivator whom he suspected to be in the 7th Order Cloud River realm being brutally crushed by the palm of a spirit beast that resembled an upright bear. The scene was gruesome. He couldn't venture any deeper as this place was too perilous. Even 9th Order Cloud River realm cultivators may not have been able to guarantee their safety here. It was no wonder why those cultivators mentioned that it had been many days since the appearance of the exotic treasure, and no one had been able to figure out what it was. If the situation was this brutal when he was still so far from the spirit peak that Wuxia cultivated on, one could only imagine what it would be like closer to the peak. Trying to ascertain the nature of the emerging exotic treasure amidst this chaos was simply as difficult as reaching the heavens. Moreover, the cultivators' plans were destined to fail as there was no actual exotic treasure. There was only Wuxia. Lu Yi was curious about how Wuxia could have survived in this chaotic scene. Didn't the spirit beasts attack him? Even if he had entered the Cloud River battlefield a few months before Lu Yi, and even if he had some surplus strength left in his mutant core, Wuxia's cultivation shouldn't be too high. Upon further reflection, the spirit beasts might not actually attack Wuxia. His cultivation brought about phenomena that benefited the spirit beasts, which explained why so many were gathered here. Pressing his hand on his battlefield imprint, Lu Yi sent a message to Wuxia before quietly retreating towards the periphery. If Wuxia had managed to stay safe for nearly 2 months, he would undoubtedly remain unharmed tonight as well. After dawn, Lu Yi could just ask him to come and meet with him instead. He was just nearby, so Wuxia shouldn't get lost again. Time passed, and the battle of the spirit beasts continued. Most of the cultivators had withdrawn since the vision had ceased. This likely indicated that someone had seized the unknown treasure. In that case, there was no longer a reason for them to take any risks. However, there were still bold cultivators with exceptional courage who sought opportunities amidst the chaos. Normally, it was not easy to kill high-level spirit beasts, but in this situation, there were chances to make some gains without much effort. For example, Lu Yi was staring ahead at this moment, witnessing the wonders of fate. Just a short distance in front of him, a massive figure struggled desperately. It was none other than the storming Thunderhawk that had attacked him before. The Thunderhawk was clearly in bad shape. Due to the venomous python coiling around it, the ground was splattered with beast blood, but the python had gone silent, most likely dead. However, the storming Thunderhawk was not faring much better. Lu Yi could sense its life force rapidly fading, and a faint green aura had enveloped its body. This was clearly a sign of toxicity. Lu Yi never expected that retreating from this direction would lead him to encounter these two spirit beasts again. After observing for a moment to confirm that the storming Thunderhawk was truly on its last legs, Lu Yi drew his saber and stepped forward. His killing intent alerted the struggling eagle. Despite facing imminent death, its sharp gaze exuded a regal aura. Drawing the inviolable from its sheath, Lu Yi advanced with blade in hand, easily dodging the few thunder attacks the size of chopsticks that were launched by the Thunderhawk. Leaping high into the air, he swung his saber downwards. A piercing cry of agony rang out, and the sharp blade cleaved through the eagle's neck, causing a fountain of fresh blood to spew into the sky. Chapter 556 Lu Yi is looking for me? Two spirit beasts in the peak of the Cloud River realm. Lu Yi shouldn't be a match for any of them, but after a gruesome fight, one of them was dead and the other was heavily injured. Lu Yi couldn't help but feel in awe at receiving the heaven's favor. He took out an empty water skin to keep the beast blood in, then quickly extracted the mutant cores of the two spirit beasts. Both mutant cores were large in size. The Thunderhawk's mutant core was covered in threads of thunder energy whilst the venomous python's mutant core presented in an emerald sheen. One could tell at a glance that its toxicity was not low. After all, this was where the essence of these spirit beasts' cultivation was located, and they matched perfectly with their own attributes. He could feed the Thunderhawk's mutant core to Amber, whereas the venomous python's mutant core could be kept away for Wuxia, which she was sure to like. Then Lu Yi retrieved some other materials that he felt would be worth something, such as the Thunderhawk's claws, beak and wings. Then, he skinned the venomous python and put everything into his storage sphere before leaving in satisfaction. The flesh of spirit beasts was very nutritious, and body-tempering cultivator would ingest large amounts of it practically every day. That was because that was the only way that they could strengthen their own vitality. So, no matter what, there was no shortage of demand for spirit beast meat. What was more, snake meat was a favorite treat for both Lu Yi and Amber. Ever since trying it for the first time, he had been hooked on the flavor. Now that such a rare opportunity had come about, Lu Yi naturally wouldn't miss it. As he moved away, the noise gradually disappeared behind him. Lu Yi found a secluded place and set up a ward before waiting in rest. Time passed, and the figures of cultivators and spirit beasts would pass him by overhead from time to time, and it wasn't until dawn that the chaos completely subsided. Lu Yi sent out a message to Wuxia, telling him to come and join up with him. On top of the spirit peak, Wuxia's tall figure stood up. Many giant wolves gathered around him in all directions, many of which were staring at him, especially the leader, whose fur was snow-white all around its body and appeared stronger than the rest of its race. It was standing just 10 meters away from Wuxia, looking down at him with its head slightly lowered, its wolf eyes filled with puzzlement. Many of the giant wolves had gotten injured during the bloody battle that went on through the night, and they were now silently licking their own wounds while some of the others dragged the corpses of other spirit beasts over to feast on with their companions, covering their maws with blood as they devoured the meat. The wolf pack was very close-knit. No matter how many other spirit beasts arrived, they would all work together to repel them, and that was the main reason why they were able to dominate this spirit peak in these recent days. At this moment, however, the person they regarded as a sacred figure not only came to life, but it seemed like he was going to leave. How could the wolves accept that? They had been here for less than 2 months and had personally experienced the benefits that this sacred figure had brought to their pack. As a mountain breeze blew past, Wuxia had a helpless expression as he faced the wolves. He had not realized how much excitement was going on around him all this while. After he was jolted by Lu Ye's message last night, the chaos around him left him bewildered. Fortunately, however, he knew then that things were not good, so he didn't dare to move recklessly either and just waited in place. With the protection of the wolf pack, none of the other spirit beasts or the other cultivators could even hope to get close to this spirit peak. Now that he had received Lu Ye's message, who was nearby, it was time to meet up with him. However, the pack leader seemed unwilling to let him go. Even without direct communication, Wuxia could sense what it was thinking. They looked at each other for a long time before Wuxia squeezed out in a sullen voice, "Lu Yi is looking for me." The pack leader cocked its head to the side, looking as if it did not understand him. Even if its abilities were equivalent to the Ninth Order Cloud River realm, and even if it gained some semblance of human intelligence, these spirit beasts resided deep inside the mountain forests, so how could they understand the language of humans? Thus began Wuxia's mission. He walked forward and pushed the pack leader with his hands. "Don't block the way." With a casual shove, he pushed the pack leader, which was even larger than him, a few steps back. Passing by the pack leader, Wuxia walked straight ahead. The giant wolves around, whether they were recuperating or feasting on meat, all rose to their feet, feeling at a loss as they watched the tall figure departing. The sacred figure of their pack was going to leave? How could this happen? A wolf howl rang out, and the pack leader stepped forward to catch up with Wuxia. It lowered its head and gently nudged his back, lifting him up. Wuxia soared into the air, and as he descended, he landed on the pack leader's back, all steady and secure. Stopping the sacred figure from leaving seemed unfeasible. In that case, they would just follow him. Understanding the pack leader's intentions, Wuxia didn't refuse but pointed in a direction instead. "That way." The pack leader picked up its pace, maneuvering nimbly through the mountain forest. Behind it, a large group of giant wolves followed in an impressive formation, causing the earth to shake as they passed. less than a dozen kilometers away where Lu Yi was hiding. He had released Amber from the spirit beast bag while Yi was lurking nearby, vigilant. After an incense stick of time, Lu Yi suddenly sensed something unusual. He quickly pressed his hand onto the ground, then his brows furrowed. He could sense movement in the ground as if many spirit beasts were galloping about, and the magnitude of the sensations indicated that there were a great number of them. Moreover, judging by the vibrations, they appeared to be getting closer. This was a dangerous place, and staying any longer wouldn't be wise. Right at that moment, a message came to his battlefield imprint. When Lu Yi checked it, he found it to be a transmission from Yi. Lu Yi. Zhu brought a lot of giant wolves with him. For a moment, Lu Yi could not process what was being said in the message. What does she mean, Zhu brought a lot of giant wolves with him? As he was going to ask for an explanation, the sight of a snow-white figure dashing over entered his field of vision. And, on the back of that figure was a second large figure. Lu Yi was slightly dazed as he watched the tall figure. Amber, who was perched on his shoulder, widened its eyes and stared at the scene in astonishment. After a while, the snow-white figure stopped about 30 meters away from Lu Yi, staring calmly at him with its wolf eyes as its soft fur swayed in the wind. Behind the figure were more than 100 giant wolves that were following it closely. Lu Yi finally understood what Yi's message meant. Zhu really did bring many giant wolves with him. What was going on here? Lu Yi was caught off guard for a moment. Zhu was only a body-tempering cultivator, and he had never heard that he possessed beast-taming abilities, so how could he associate with so many giant wolves? Moreover, from what he was seeing, it seemed like this entire pack of wolves was under his command. He couldn't help but recall the events last night, and he did hear the successive wolf howls. Now that he thought about it, the howls must have come from this wolf pack. However, it was the strength of this wolf pack that surprised him even more. The one that he suspected to be the leader, the one that Zhu rode, was undoubtedly comparable in strength to a 9th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. The rest of the wolves were also emitting a ferocious aura. A minority of them were lower than the 4th or 5th order, while many were in the 8th or the 9th order. It was simply hard to imagine just how powerful such a pack of wolves could be in battle. After more than half a year of not seeing each other, Zhu seemed visibly delighted to be reunited with him again. Even his usually stiff face showed a hint of a smile. He leapt down from the back of the wolf and went over to Lu Yi in a large stride. As he drew closer, his shadow cast over Lu Yi. Lu Yi looked up at the tall figure and was surprised to find that Zhu had grown even taller again. His plain clothing could not hide his physique, and his exposed skin had a bronze-like luster as if it were forged from refined iron. Zhu lifted his large hand and patted Lu Yi on the shoulder, squeezing him down a bit. Lu Yi grinned, not saying a word, just expressing joy towards their long-awaited reunion. Amber leapt from Lu Yi's shoulder and landed on Zhu's head, settling down on it with practiced ease. In the midst of the wilderness, two figures stood facing each other, one tall and one short. Behind the towering figure stood more than 100 giant snow-white wolves that were waiting silently, creating an inexplicably strange scene. Lu Yi tilted his body to look past Zhu at the wolves, then he lowered his voice and asked, "What's going on?" For now, the wolves seemed to have been brought here by Zhu, and they had not shown any malice to neither him nor Zhu thus far. However, Lu Yi was still cautious. He had only been parted with him for half a year, so how had Zhu managed to subdue such a wolf pack? "They followed me," Zhu answered with a helpless expression. "Why?" Zhu shook his head, indicating that he did not know the answer. He was simply waiting for Lu Yi on the Spirit Peak. Then in the blink of an eye, he woke up to find himself surrounded by a large pack of wolves just a few days ago. Now that he wanted to leave, the wolf pack ended up following him. Even he himself could not figure out why the wolves were insistent on following him. Seeing that he wasn't going to get an answer out of him, Lu Yi gave up. "Then come with me. I've already made arrangements with 4th senior brother and senior sister Feng. Let's go meet them now." Zhu agreed without objection. Lu Yi summoned his spirit boat with a raise of his hand and called out to Yi, who was lurking nearby, and she immediately revealed herself. After exchanging greetings with Zhu, Yi leapt onto the spirit boat. Zhu also stepped onto the spirit boat. However, just as they were about to leave, the snow-white figure charged forward like a gust of wind and rammed against the spirit boat, sending it tumbling in the air while Lu Yi and the others were forced to land in a pitiful fall. Drawing his saber, Lu Yi watched the pack leader cautiously as it stood just a short distance away. Soon, however, he sheathed his blade. Though the pack leader had knocked over his spirit boat, it didn't exhibit any strong hostility towards them. It seemed that it simply wanted to prevent them from leaving. He wasn't the target of its obstruction, however, Zhu Jia was. The pack leader seemed reluctant to see Zhu Jia leave. Based on last night's events and the situation they were in now, Lu Yi formed a conjecture in his mind. The anomaly brought about by Zhu Jia's cultivation attracted many spirit beasts to gather around him, indicating that the anomaly was of great benefit to them. If the wolf pack wanted Zhu Jia to stay due to this, then everything would make sense. After a brief contemplation, Lu Yi said, Try to communicate with them and ask them what they want. Yi nodded. Yes. Yi herself didn't have the ability to communicate directly with the beasts, but it was possible with Amber's assistance. Amber jumped down from Zhu Jia's head, and with a shake of its body, its spirit energy churned, and it transformed into its true form. With an imposing presence, it approached the pack leader. What happened next was a sight that Lu Yi found hard to comprehend. Amber and the pack leader exchanged roars and howls, communicating almost for as long as it took for an incense stick to burn. Only then did Amber turn around and walk back to them. Standing by Lu Yi's side, Yi sensed Amber's thoughts and understood. They don't want Zhu Jia to leave. They want him to stay, and the pack leader even said that Zhu Jia was their sacred figure. Chapter 557, Ameliorate Valley. Their sacred figure? Lu Yi frowned. That's what it means, but it can also be understood as a totem. Yi continued to explain, they have been by Zhu Jia's side for a long time, and Zhu Jia can help their pack increase their strength, so they will not let Zhu Jia leave. The pack leader even said that we can go, and they won't stop us from doing so. Lu Yi came here to take Zhu Jia with him to join up with 4th senior brother and Feng Yukan. If he didn't take Zhu Jia with him, then what was the point of him coming here? Naturally they could leave by force. With his and Zhu Jia's current level of cultivation, even without flight-type artifacts they could still fly. It didn't seem like these mutant wolves had any flight abilities, so they wouldn't be able to catch up with them. However, the spirit beast's strength had reached such a level that even if they didn't have the means to fly, they would still be able to attack any enemies in the air. If they did anything rash and provoked them here, then they may not be able to get out of it unscathed. This was a difficult situation. Seemingly sensing Lu Yi's thoughts, the pack leader suddenly let out a howl, to which Amber roared back in response lest it be seen as weak. In the next instant, the spirit essence on the bodies of the hundreds of giant wolves began to churn, and a chilling killing intent spread out in all directions. Lu Yi immediately felt his skin tingling, and he raised his hand to his blade's hilt. During this moment of tension, Zhu Jia suddenly raised his fan-like palm and slapped the head of the pack leader, causing it to stumble. Stand down. The pack leader shook its head, and the fierceness in its eyes quickly dissipated. The hundreds of ferocious wolves also quickly went dormant, becoming harmless. Lu Yi clicked his tongue in wonder at the sight. Just from the current situation before him, he could tell that Zhu Jia held an unrivaled position in the hearts of these wolves. Even the leader did not show any fuss when it was beaten on the head, which was not how a spirit beast was supposed to react. It was true that Zhu Jia lacked the ability to tame beasts, nor had he controlled these mutant wolves before, but the benefits he had brought to the wolves during this period of time had given him the qualifications to control the entire pack. The pack leader glanced at Zhu Jia, then at Lu Yi before letting out a few soft yips. Yi immediately translated, "It says we can leave, but we have to bring them since they want to follow Zhu Jia. Wherever Zhu Jia goes is wherever they will go." Lu Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry at that. How did they end up bargaining with these wolves? He never thought that such a big person like Zhu Jia would have a pack of spirit beasts clinging to him. This kind of thing was most likely unheard of in the Cloud River battlefield, not even in the ancient times. If the beast masters were to see what was happening here, then they would definitely see Zhu Jia as some sort of deity. However, it was obviously unrealistic to bring along such a large pack of mutant wolves with them. Spirit beasts were of great value to cultivators, and bringing them away from here would only lead to a lot of trouble. If they didn't bring the wolves with them, however, then they wouldn't let Zhu Jia leave. Following Zhu Jia was their greatest concession. If they were forced to leave, then the wolves wouldn't attack Zhu Jia, only him. Even though the pack leader looked like a docile and gentle creature in front of Zhu Jia, it was only to him alone. Lu Yi frowned. This really was a difficult situation. Should they leave Zhu Jia behind? With such a strong pack of wolves protecting him, then Zhu Jia shouldn't be met with any great dangers. He could even live like a fish in water inside the Grand Wild's peak. However, the anomaly generated by Zhu Jia's cultivation was a problem. It had already attracted so many cultivators to come and investigate last time, and even a large number of spirit beasts have gathered around. Even if he had survived without issue for so many days, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't encounter any accidents at any time. In the midst of these thoughts, Lu Yi suddenly thought of a solution. The reason why he wanted to take Zhu Jiao with him was so that he could bring him along to meet up with fourth senior brother and Feng Yuechan. Then they were going to look for a suitable area to set up a Primus-level Arcane Glade. They were the ones in charge of finding a spot for the Arcane Glade, but they never sent any news back after so many days had passed, so it was clear that they were still in search of a suitable location. It wasn't easy to find a suitable place for an Arcane Glade. First of all, it had to have some degree of seclusion, and secondly, there had to be a sufficient geographical advantage. Doesn't the Grand Wilds Peak seem like a good choice? This was a dangerous place with a high concentration of powerful spirit beasts. Even though many cultivators came here to hunt these beasts, they never ventured too deeply into it. So, as long as the location was deep enough, they could reduce the risk of being discovered by other cultivators. And this wolf pack following Zhu Jia around were like the natural protectors of the Arcane Glade. With such a huge force, even if they went deeper into the Grand Wilds Peak, they would still have sufficient power to deal with most crises. So, they might not need to take Zhu Jia away from here. Situating the Arcane Glade deep inside the Grand Wilds Peak seemed to be a good choice. At that thought, Lu Ye's mind suddenly opened up as if he saw the light at the end of a tunnel. Looking up now, the large wolves the size of calves became much more pleasant to look at too. Of course, this was only if the wolves were loyal to Zhu Jia. If there wasn't enough loyalty in place, then no one would feel safe around such a powerful pack. However, judging from the current situation, loyalty didn't seem to be a problem. After all, they had to improve the strength of the pack through Zhu Jia's cultivation. Amber, tell it to lead us to a safe and quiet place. Amber then growled at the wolf pack, who responded from time to time. Then it looked up at Lu Yi with a human look in its wolf eyes. A short while later, the pack leader turned around, lowered its head, and nudged Zhu Jia onto its back before taking off, heading deep inside the woods at a brisk pace. Hundreds of giant wolves followed. Lu Yi also got on the tiger's back, and with a few quick steps, Amber caught up with the pack leader and ran alongside it. As they moved deeper and deeper into the Grand Wilds Peak, Lu Yi took out his 10-point map to check their whereabouts. Currently, they were already in a considerably deep part of the Grand Wilds Peak, and the spirit beasts that would generally appear here wouldn't be too weak. Usually, if a cultivator passed through here, it would definitely be unsafe for them as there may be hidden spirit beasts coming out to attack them at any time. However, no spirit beast dared to challenge the wolf pack. Lu Yi even saw a spirit beast with a strong aura avoiding the trajectory of the wolves. It was only after the pack left that the spirit beast let out a few roars as if to vent its frustration at the wolves' intrusion into its territory. Half a day later, the wolf pack stopped at a valley. It was a picturesque mountain valley where colorful flowers grew and birdsong played in their surroundings. The valley was large and was surrounded by mountains on three sides. On one side was a cliff with a sweeping waterfall running down from it, the rumbling of the crashing water incessant. Looking up at it, the sunlight refracted into a colorful haze as it illuminated the splashing water. Under the waterfall was a river, besides which many wild beasts drank. It's beautiful. Yi gazed at the waterfall and the rainbow from atop Amber's head. Few people knew that such a paradise existed amidst the dangers of the Grand Wilds Peak. Upon checking the 10-point map, Lu Yi found that their location was labeled as Ameliorate Valley. He flew around the valley with his flight-type artifact, but he didn't see any traces of spirit beasts about. This was a good location. Not only was the scenery beautiful and the environment pleasant, there were still natural barriers in place. So, if Zhu Jia were to cultivate again in the future, then even if the phenomena were to reappear, it could easily be covered by the mountains around the valley, and it wouldn't draw such a spectacle as before. Lu Yi, Yi called out to him. Let's set up the Arcane Glade here, shall we? Clearly she also had the same idea. Lu Yi nodded. I'll contact fourth senior brother. Tapping his hand on his battlefield imprint, he sent out a message. Fourth senior brother, any ideas on the Arcane Glade's location yet? Li Baxian soon responded saying, don't worry little junior brother. We're still looking. I have a suitable place here. Oh? Little junior brother found one? Where is it located? Grand Wilds Peak, Ameliorate Valley. He waited a while but there was no response from Li Baxian, though he figured that he was probably checking his 10-point map for Ameliorate Valley's exact location. It wasn't until a while later that Li Baxin responded. Little junior brother, this location is too deep inside Grand Wild's Peak. It's not safe there. If we place our arcane glade there, it will reduce our chance of being exposed to cultivators, but the spirit beasts there are not to be messed with. The situation is a bit complicated. Senior brother and senior sister Feng should come and convene with me first. You'll understand then. Very well. Li Baxin didn't ask too many questions about it. Since Lu Yi asked them to convene with him, he immediately set off with Feng Yuechan in their direction. After ending the transmission, he asked, "What did fourth senior brother say?" "They're on the way, but it'll take a few days. We can take this time to familiarize ourselves with our surroundings and explore to see whether or not this is a suitable location for the arcane glade." And, with a decision made, Lu Yi immediately took action. Even though he had circled around the valley earlier and didn't find anything special, it was still best to err on the side of caution. After all, spirit beasts were naturally good at hiding, and this kind of innate ability was even more powerful than the hiding abilities of any ghost cultivator. Zhu Jia was also looking around alongside him. It was worth mentioning that the wolves were still following him wherever he went, especially the pack leader whose eyes never left Zhu Jia's side, as if afraid that he would run away. Almost half a day later, Lu Yi had already checked the area within 50 kilometers of the valley and confirmed that there was no danger here save for a few wild beasts, and there were no signs of other powerful spirit beasts either. As night fell, a round moon hung in the sky. The wolves gathered around Zhu Jia, watching him intently, clearly waiting to cultivate with him. However, Zhu Jia had no mind to cultivate and was sitting around a campfire with Lu Yi, gulping as he watched the snake meat roasting over the fire. He had been living a hard life out in the wilderness by himself since parting ways with Lu Yi, especially in the last 2 months which he spent in a state of stillness. It had been a long time since he'd had a full stomach. Amber was next to them, chewing on meat in large bites. It wasn't long until the large cut of snake meat entered its belly, but it was still not enough to satisfy it. It ran over to Lu Yi and nudged him with its large head, prompting Lu Yi to bring out another cut of snake meat. Soon the snake meat was done cooking. Lu Yi and Zhu Jia shared the food together, and despite the great difference in their body size, they weren't much different when it came to consuming food. They had even crunched the bones and gulped them all down into their stomachs. Chapter 558 Reliability. After they ate their fill, Lu Yi took out some materials from his storage sphere and circulated his spiritual power, refining them into ward flags. Since the Carnage Colosseum, he had few ward flags left that he could use, and if he were going to be setting up wards in the Arcane Glade, then he would definitely need a large number of these flags, so he refined some first just in case. Zhu Jia was just sitting quietly at first, savoring the delicious roasted snake meat, but as time passed he gradually closed his eyes and entered into that same state of stillness again. His breath grew almost still, and even his vitality and his aura were reduced to an extreme state as if he were a dead man. A milky white light formed around his burly figure that induced the moon's essence to pour down, and all of a sudden half of the valley was bathed in the hazy and majestic moon essence. The wolves gathered around Zhu Jia and tilted their heads up, greedily devouring the moon essence that descended from the sky. Even Amber, who was perched on Zhu Jia's head, took on the same posture as the wolves. Lu Yi stopped what he was doing and just watched the scene silently. He wasn't sure why such a phenomenon was triggered whenever Zhu Jia cultivated, but for one he believed that the phenomenon brought great benefits to the spirit beasts. Otherwise the wolves wouldn't keep on clinging to Zhu Jia. Amber had cultivated with Zhu Jia before and it did benefit it as well. Rumor had it that spirit beasts had the ability to swallow the essence of both the sun and the moon to cultivate themselves, but spirit beasts wouldn't generally cause such a commotion when they cultivated. Zhu Jia was the only one that had this peculiarity. After some thought, Lu Yi decided to collect his mind and tried to cultivate as well. But soon he gave up on the idea as it didn't seem to have any special effect on him. The moon essence that he bathed in certainly warmed him up, but it didn't have any effect on his strength. The situation was the same for Yi. So, he concluded that this kind of cultivation was only suited for spirit beasts. Zhu Jia was undoubtedly an outlier in this case. Calling Yi, Lu Yi stood up and summoned his spirit boat heading up into the sky. He wanted to see how visible the phenomenon formed by Zhu Jia's cultivation truly was. Even though the valley was surrounded by mountains on all sides, which could cover the visibility of the anomaly to a great extent, there was still a risk of exposure if the scope was too great. If that were the case, then the spirit beasts inside of the Grand Wild's Peak would surely gather, adding a lot of trouble to their plates. And if the cultivators were also lured over here, then this place would not be suitable for the Arcane Glade. A quick inspection revealed that the situation was not that bad. The phenomenon was mostly concealed by the valley, so unless one was close enough, it wouldn't be easily detected. Once he returned, he could set up a special concealment ward for Wuxia, then there shouldn't be too much of a problem left. After returning to his spot, Lu Yi continued refining more ward flags. When the sun came up, he, Wuxia and Yi worked together to build places for them to live. Since they decided to set up the Arcane Glade here, then they naturally couldn't go without homes to live in. Even if cultivators did not have high requirements for their place of residence, it was still necessary to have a place where they could be protected from the wind and rain. It didn't take much to build a few wooden huts. As the days passed, a few huts were erected in the picturesque mountain valley. In terms of wards, Lu Yi had only set up a concealment ward to cover the phenomenon that arose from Wuxia nightly cultivation, but he had not set anything up beyond that. Everything would have to wait until Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan arrived and confirmed that the Arcane Glade would be created here. On this day, Lu Yi was refining ward flags when he suddenly had a feeling in his heart, and he looked up in a direction. There, two streams of light entered his vision, quickly making their way over. Once he focused his vision and confirmed who the two streams of light were, Lu Yi rose up to greet them. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan had arrived. Upon seeing Lu Yi, the two of them immediately flew over to him and soon they were face to face. Lu Yi saluted, "Fourth senior brother, senior sister Feng." Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan both looked travel-worn, and in a bit of a messy state. Even though both of them were already in the Fifth Order Cloud River realm, they still encountered some difficulties along the way. There were far too many spirit beasts lurking around in the Grand Wild's peak. So, no matter which direction they came from, they would inevitably meet with some trouble. If it weren't for the many treasures that Feng Yuechan carried, then it would have been impossible for them to have come this deep into the mountain range with just their level of cultivation. Even so, the two of them were targeted by a powerful spirit beast, and it took a lot of effort for them to get out of that situation. Now that he saw Lu Yi, Li Baxian finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Little junior brother, this place really wasn't easy to get to. However, it was exactly for that reason that this place was well hidden." Feng Yuechan had already been captivated by the picturesque scenery and was looking around. Upon seeing the many huge wolf mutants scattered around the valley, she couldn't help but wince and tugged on Li Baxian's sleeve, pointing to the front. "Senior brother, look." When Li Baxian looked up, even his expression changed slightly, and he looked at Lu Yi with uncertainty. "What's going on here?" So many wolf mutants were gathered here that it was clear they were a pack. However, what he couldn't understand was why his little junior brother seemed to be living in peace with this pack of wolf mutants. It's a long story. Lu Yi called over Wuxia, who was hanging around the side, and introduced them. Wuxia gave a silent bow as his greeting to Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan. Feng Yuechan had to crane her head up to look at Wuxia, who was at least 2 to 3 heads taller than her. Even though she had seen many large body-tempering cultivators before, she couldn't help but think of 2 words upon seeing this man. Naturally gifted. Wuxia's size alone gave off an oppressive aura, and it was hard to imagine just what kind of terrifying strength was hidden in such a tower-like figure. Li Baxian had seen Wuxia from a distance before, but had never met him face to face. Moreover, Wuxia's cultivation level was much lower than his then. Now that he got the chance to meet him again, he gave off a very different feeling to him. Even without fighting him, Li Baxian could judge at a glance that this junior brother Wuxia was not an easy one to deal with. The wolf pack was brought here by Wuxia. He creates an anomaly when he cultivates, and it benefits the wolves, so they began regarding Wuxia as a sacred figure of theirs, and you can say they have a dependent relationship with Wuxia. Lu Yi gave them a brief explanation. Dependent? Li Baxian clicked his tongue in wonder at what he heard, then he snapped to his senses. Is this the complicated situation that you mentioned earlier? Lu Yi nodded. Li Baxian didn't know what to say. Not only was this a complicated situation, it was simply unheard of. It was unimaginable that a pack of mutant wolves like these would choose to become dependent on a cultivator. Do you think it's safe? Li Baxian asked. For now it seems so. The wolves haven't expressed any sort of hostility towards me in the past few days. They just want to cultivate with Wuxia. So, what's that anomaly you were talking about? And why would it make the wolves follow junior brother Wuxia? You'll find out by nightfall. It's a type of anomaly that has a strong attraction to spirit beasts. Many cultivators saw it before and thought that an exotic treasure had been born, which caused quite a commotion. Li Baxin pressed down the doubts in his heart and nodded. Then he looked around at his surroundings before commenting, "This place is deep within the Grand Wilds Peak, so it's an excellent location, and the scenery is great. With a natural barrier too. If this wolf pack can be relied upon, then this is indeed a suitable location for an arcane glade. Little junior brother has good eyes." Lu Yi shook his head. "It was the wolves who brought me here." He raised his hand and pointed at the largest wolf mutant. "That's the pack leader. Generally it's the one we talk to when we have any issues." "Oh." Li Baxin looked in the direction that Lu Yi was pointing to and saw the wolf looking their way. It had a curious look in its eyes, as if it couldn't understand why two more humans had come. However, in the wolf's mind, as long as their pack's sacred figure didn't go away, then it didn't matter if more humans came. So, the wolf only looked at them for a moment before resting on the ground, no longer paying attention to their side. "Do you think this is a suitable place for the arcane glade, senior brother?" Lu Yi asked. "If we can trust the wolves, then it's suitable," Li Baxin answered. The only problem they may have to face by placing their arcane glade here was whether spirit beasts would come to disturb them. Moreover, any spirit beast that appeared in such a place would certainly not be too weak. If the wolves could be relied upon, then they would serve as a natural deterrent, so not many spirit beasts would dare to come lest they bring misfortune upon themselves. "I'm curious to know just how strong that pack leader is, and also what is the general strength of the pack?" Li Baxin asked cautiously. "I've been observing them for the past few days, and the pack leader has strength equivalent to the 9th Order Cloud River realm, but the strength of the pack is mixed. There are those in the 8th or 9th Order, but also those in the 1st or 2nd Order. Most of them are above the 5th Order, whereas those below that only take up 30% of the pack." Lu Yi went on, "I know what senior brother is worried about, and I was considering the same question myself. However, based on my observations through the past few days, the wolves have shown no intentions other than a strong reliance on following Wuxia to cultivate." "What about junior brother Wuxia?" Li Baxin then asked. "Wuxia is in the 4th Order. His cultivation level was the same as Lu Ye's current level. He entered the Cloud River battlefield several months before Lu Yi, but there was still energy left in the mutant core in Wuxia's body when he broke through into the Cloud River realm, so he had some foundation in his cultivation upon his advancement. The reason Lu Yi could advance so quickly in his cultivation was thanks to the number of amulets he had amassed, but Wuxia was different. His gains in his cultivation came through bitter cultivation that he obtained while in that state of dormancy. Lu Yi had known as early as in the Spirit Creek battlefield that Wuxia was very tolerant of loneliness. Apart from cultivating, his greatest pleasure in life was generally to eat with Lu Yi. Other than that, there was nothing else that could arouse his interest. Lu Yi had met so many people, and there was none that lived a life as pure as Wuxia. And it was precisely because of that purity that even through grueling cultivation he could advance so quickly. Not to mention, Wuxia's method of cultivation was more special than anyone else. "Senior brother, are you thinking that Wuxia isn't strong enough to suppress the wolves?" Lu Yi could see the concern that Li Baxin was having. Li Baxin nodded. "Spirit beasts are simply spirit beasts after all. They're wild and undomesticated, so it's difficult to subdue them without sufficient strength." It was only natural for him to be worried. If one day the wolves suddenly erupted and attacked them, then none of them would get away unscathed. However, there was no guarantee that that would happen. While the two of them were talking here, Wuxia, who stood idly by the side, suddenly raised his head and made a strange sound towards the location of the wolves. It sounded deep like the howl of a wolf, but not exactly. The pack leader that was lying at that side immediately got up and ran over to Wuxia's side, then looked up at him with inquiring eyes. "Ping ping." Wuxia raised his hand and slapped it on the head several times. Both Lu Yi and Li Baxin's eyes twitched at that. As the water came out of the ground, the world spirit chi that filled the air was even denser than that which emerged in a tertiary-level arcane glade. Moreover, this was just the beginning. Once the arcane glade stabilized completely, the world's spiritual chi would only become richer. "Senior brother, there's something that I can't understand," Lu Yi suddenly said. "What is it?" "They say that as long as one possesses a wisp of sanctification, then one can create an arcane glade of the equivalent level, but world spiritual chi cannot come from nowhere. Where does the spiritual qi that is pouring out of the ground alongside the spirit spout come from? It can't have come from the wisp of sanctification. Li Baxin explained, I've thought about this question myself and I've also asked some people. In short, there are two known theories. One is that an enormous amount of rich world spiritual qi exists deep underneath the Cloud River battlefield, and the wisp of sanctification has opened up a spirit spout, which spring water gushes out of, thus leading up the world spiritual qi that had been hidden deep underneath the ground. Lu Yi pondered for a while and shook his head. This doesn't sound right. Why do you say that? You see, senior brother, if that truly were the case, then the world spiritual qi that exists under the ground should be of a fixed quality. However, if we use a Primus-level wisp of sanctification here, then what we get would be a Primus-level arcane glade. And, if we were to use a tertiary-level wisp of sanctification here, then it would be a tertiary-level arcane glade instead, and there's no way to explain that phenomenon. Li Baxin nodded. Indeed. If the world spiritual qi underneath the ground is fixed, then it shouldn't matter what quality of wisp of sanctification is used. The resulting arcane glade should be the same. What is the second theory? That the wisp of sanctification is only a catalyst, and the spirit spout is only the external manifestation. There's no world spiritual qi hidden in the ground either, just a gift bestowed by the heavens. In other words, as we make use of the Primus-level wisp of sanctification, it is like opening a channel with the heavens, a channel that can transfer over the corresponding grade of world spiritual qi according to the level of the arcane glade. So, as long as there exists a wisp of sanctification, it doesn't matter where it's placed and an arcane glade of equivalent level can be created. That's quite a novel theory. However, it does explain a lot of the questions. Pondering for a moment, that does seem to be the case indeed. If it was based on this theory, then all the doubts he had in his heart could be explained. The spirit spout had already been born, and the accumulation of world spiritual qi in the arcane glade still required a few days before it could stabilize, which was a good time for Lu Yi to set up the wards. He refined a large number of ward flags a few days ago, and now they can finally be put to use. Yi and Feng Yuechan, on the other hand, were in charge of furnishing the wooden huts. For a long time to come, they were going to be living here, and having a more comfortable living environment would naturally bring up one's mood. Li Baxin and Zhu Jia tried to help, but very soon the two of them were blasted out of the huts. Looking at each other, Li Baxin could only go and look for Lu Yi instead and help him. As for Zhu Jia, he just sat down next to the spirit spout and cultivated in peace. As night fell, the fire was rekindled. The moon hung high in the sky, and the picturesque valley was filled with joyous laughter and the aroma of delicious wine and meat. In the second half of the night, Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan finally saw the anomaly resulting from Zhu Jia's cultivation, and they were both astonished. Especially when the entire wolf pack would resonate with him as he cultivated, swallowing the moon's essence. The scene was spectacular. Fortunately, Lu Yi had set up a concealment ward beforehand, so even though a magnificent phenomenon was produced, as long as one wasn't too close, then one shouldn't be able to detect it, whether they be man or spirit beast. A few days later, Lu Yi had set up large numbers of wards around the entire arcane glade, and the world spiritual qi inside of it also stabilized completely. Compared to the tertiary-level arcane glade that he and Kitty Shin occupied before, the cultivation environment in the Primus-level arcane glade was 10 times more favorable than that. The pure world spiritual qi had almost turned into a mist that enveloped the entirety of the arcane glade. So, even without actively cultivating, one needed only to live in this place and their cultivation level would rise continuously. All of them deeply felt just how much a Primus-level arcane glade could provide to a cultivator, and it was no wonder why the cultivators of the Cloud River realm were so eager to occupy such a place. With an arcane glade like this, the growth of a cultivator in the Cloud River realm could be shortened by at least half. Through the past few days, Yi and Amber had both broken through, reaching the third-order Cloud River realm. They were just short of it before, and now with the accumulation of their cultivation through the past few days, they naturally gained enough to allow them to make a breakthrough. After the first few days of excitement and novelty were over, their days gradually returned to normal. That was how a cultivator's life was like, always focusing on the pursuit of realm enhancement. Amongst the few, the one who cultivated the hardest was undoubtedly Zhu Jia. During the day he cultivated in his hut by breathing in the world's spiritual qi, but as a moonlit night fell, he would leave his abode and cultivate outside. If there was no moonlight for a few days, then he could stay inside his hut for many days at a time. Lu Yi had also given him a piece of dragon scale. The vitality contained within a dragon's scale was extremely useful for a body-tempering cultivator like Zhu. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan also cherished their new cultivation environment very much, and all of them were working hard to improve their strength. In contrast to them, Lu Yi was the one who had the most time on his hands. He never needed to put too much effort in cultivating. With hundreds of spirit-gathering funnels all over his body, he needed only to be inside of the arcane glade and world spiritual qi would seep into his body incessantly. Then, by consuming some spirit pills every so often, the volume of the river of spiritual power within his body would grow day by day. While cultivating, he would always spend that time reading books. The books he brought from Lady Yun and the blade technique insights that he got from the raving bladesmen were his chosen reading materials that he used to pass the time. Perhaps due to how he was the most idle one, Lu Yi had been getting along quite well with the wolf pack during this period of time. A few of them had even become quite familiar with him and would occasionally squeeze their heads over to join him whenever Lu Yi was reading a book. A batch of wolf mutants would leave every few days to hunt due to a spirit beast's instinct to survive. After getting to know the wolf mutants, Lu Yi also gained some spirit beast meat from them whenever they came back from their hunt. Other than reading books and practicing his blade techniques daily, Lu Yi spent most of his time practicing tattoos on himself. These days, his mastery in the way of tattoos had increased again, but so far, he had only been able to practice on himself as there were no suitable subjects for him to work on. One day as he was practicing on his own body, a large head suddenly pushed its way over and looked on in curiosity. Lu Yi raised his head to meet the gaze of the pair of wolf eyes. This was one of the wolf mutants that he had grown closer to recently, and there was a patch of blue fur on its forehead that looked like a blooming blue flower. Four eyes met, but Lu Yi ignored it and continued focusing on practicing his tattooing. But soon, his hand stopped and he looked up again at the wolf mutant before him. A thought passed through his mind. This seems like a good target to practice the way of tattoos on. He hadn't thought about it before, mainly because in order to create a tattoo on a spirit beast's body, it was inevitable to have enough trust with one beforehand. Otherwise, Lu Yi could very well be attacked by the spirit beast while pricking them with a needle, and the loss would outweigh the gains then. However, now that they were acquainted with each other, maybe he could give it a try? With that thought in mind, Lu Yi quickly called out to someone. Amber. Amber, who was lounging lazily in the sun not far away, quickly got up and came over, leaping onto Lu Yi's shoulder. Lu Yi raised his hand and constructed Glyph, sharp edge on his palm. In a flash, a light bloomed over his entire palm. The wolf mutant took a step back, clearly sensing the sharpness of the aura. Ask it, does it wish to possess such an ability? Amber immediately understood Lu Yi's intentions and began conversing with the wolf mutant before it. The wolf mutant glanced over at Lu Yi's palm from time to time with a clear look of temptation in its wolf eyes. Tell it that I just need to prick its skin a few times with a needle, and it would gain that ability. It can make its claws even sharper. Lu Yi struck while the iron was hot. Amber continued relaying Lu Yi's words. As expected, the wolf mutant was tempted by the offer. It stepped forward and lowered its head, showing submission to Lu Yi to do whatever he wanted. Chapter 562. Practicing on the wolf mutant was also simply a whim from Lu Yi. He thought it would take some persuading, but he never expected it to be so cooperative with him. However, creating a tattoo required specific materials, and different tattoos required different materials which must all be meticulously chosen. The materials generally consisted of a mixture of beast blood and medicinal fluids, and each tattoo artist prepared their own blend of the mixture in different proportions, their own exclusive formula. Lu Yi had access to various tattoo formulas, naturally from Lady Yun, and they were all of excellent quality. However, the storm shade and venomous python blood he collected previously were not suitable for tattooing sharp edge, and it would be impractical to go out and buy or collect more at this time. After some thought, Lu Yi came up with an idea. Since it wasn't feasible to go out and buy or collect the materials, he decided to summon a divine opportunity column directly and use it to purchase some from the Vault of Providence. He had already planned to summon a divine opportunity column before, but time had been so short that he hadn't had the opportunity to act on it yet. While summoning a divine opportunity column was costly, having one around was a lifesaver in case of an unavoidable crisis. The cultivators of the Arcane Glade could use it to escape back to Jianghu, so it was worth the high cost. In addition, the Arcane Glade was located deep within the Grand Wild's peak, making it an inconvenience to interact with the outside world, like if there was a need to buy something, such as in this case, Lu Yi could connect directly to the Vault of Providence without leaving the area to find the Divine Trade Association. Most large Primus-level arcane glades have their own divine opportunity columns for the convenience of the cultivator's needs. Smaller arcane glades rarely possess the means to summon a divine opportunity column, but an exception was probably going to appear today. Once he made up his mind, Lu Yi respectfully requested for a divine opportunity column. Having already summoned a divine opportunity column once in the Carnage Colosseum, the second time naturally went much smoother for Lu Yi. As Lu Yi spoke, a blue light shot up into the air from the back of his hand, followed by the descent of a majestic object from the sky, creating a powerful aura that swept through the surroundings. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan, who were both cultivating in their respective rooms, were startled by the commotion and quickly came out to investigate. Upon seeing the appearance of a new divine opportunity column in front of Lu Yi, Li Baxian's eyes twitched. "Little junior brother, did you summon another divine opportunity column?" For a single cultivator in the Cloud River realm to summon 2 divine opportunity columns, and with only a little over a month between each summoning, was probably unprecedented. One divine opportunity column was worth 100,000 contribution points, so 2 columns equaled 200,000 contribution points. Which Cloud River realm cultivator was so wealthy? Li Baxian couldn't help but sigh in amazement at how wealthy his little junior brother was. He really couldn't be compared. Then, when he thought about the 2-point restoration pills Lu Yi bought him that cost 300,000 contribution points each, he realized that he was miserably poor as the senior brother in comparison to him. There's something I want to buy," Lu Yi casually explained. He placed his hand on the divine opportunity column and connected his consciousness to the Vault of Providence. Feng Yuechan sighed, "Truly with wealth comes freedom to do anything one pleases." To summon a divine opportunity column just so he could buy something from the Vault of Providence, this level of extravagance was unsurpassed. However, they couldn't compare with him on such matters. Even though they were disciples of the second-tier sect, the devoted ones with a large family came many mouths to feed, and even for a pampered disciple like Feng Yuechan, the resources allocated to her were still limited. Often they had to find ways to acquire cultivation resources themselves. But Lu Yi was different. He practically built up the entire Crimson Blood sect on his own, and with his position and strength as the overlord of the Spirit Creek battlefield, he received plenty of benefits there. The Crimson Blood sect was wealthy because of him, so nobody restricted him whenever he used some of the resources. Once they confirmed there was no external threat, Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan returned to their rooms to continue cultivating. Meanwhile, Lu Yi stayed in the Vault of Providence for a while and quickly acquired the various materials he needed. Summoning a divine opportunity column cost 100,000 contribution points, but purchasing the materials only cost him less than 1,000 contribution points. Checking his battlefield information, the contribution points section displayed the number 83,520. Through selling various resources in the Spirit Creek battlefield, Lu Yi had accumulated around 300,000 contribution points. However, he quickly spent a large portion of that buying flames of earthen spirits and various other flames. He also bought a spirit storage ring. After entering the Cloud River battlefield, he also bought many mutant cores for Amber to eat as snacks, so he was left with just over 180,000 contribution points. Now, he had once again spent more than 100,000 contribution points. All his spending was still worth it in the end. With a divine opportunity column in the Arcane Glade, they could enter any time from the outside world, and they would be sent directly into the Arcane Glade itself. With the various materials now in his possession, Lu Yi followed Lady Yun's formula and processed them. It was his first time doing this, so it was inevitable that he would be slightly clumsy. Fortunately, it wasn't too complicated. In an incense stick of time, 3 bottles of differently colored tattoo materials appeared before him. One was golden, one was ochre, and one was cyan. The wolf mutant with the blue flower on its head was still squatting next to Lu Yi. Lu Yi raised his hand and pointed to the golden bottle, saying, "This one is this type." As he spoke, Glyph, sharp edge was formed in his hand, emitting a faint brilliance and exuding a sharp aura. Then he pointed to the ochre bottle and said, "This one is this type." The Glyph transformed into Glyph, protection, emanating a sturdy protective force. Finally, he pointed to the cyan bottle and said, "And the last one is this type." The Glyph transformed into Glyph, windwalk, and a sense of agility and lightness appeared throughout his entire palm. "So, little one, which one do you want?" Whether it was sharp edge, protection, or windwalk, They were among the simple and practical glyphs that Lu Yi initially obtained, and he had practiced them many times on himself. While he couldn't guarantee a perfect success rate, 80 to 90% was still doable since these 3 glyphs were not complicated. Originally, Lu Yi just wanted to try Glyph, Sharp Edge on the wolf mutant, but now that he had enough materials he could provide it with more choices. Even though the wolf mutant couldn't understand human speech, it possessed sentience and could naturally understand Lu Yi's simple gestures. After Lu Yi finished speaking, it raised its paw and tapped the golden bottle. Lu Yi nodded. With its fierce and aggressive nature, it was natural for the wolf mutant to pursue the ultimate attack. Since it made a choice, Lu Yi naturally had to fulfill its request. After all, it was his first client, even if it were a mutant beast that couldn't speak. Lu Yi made up his mind to give it a good experience. The question was where to make the tattoo. Glyph, Sharp Edge was an offensive glyph, so there were only 2 suitable locations, and those were the claws and the mouth. Over the past few days, Lu Yi had witnessed the play fights among the wolf mutants. Their sharp claws and teeth were their natural weapons. Judging by the commotion they created, anyone would think they were fighting to the death, but based on Lu Yi's observations, they were in fact merely honing their skills through this method. Looking at the wolf mutant in front of him with the blue flower on its head, its strength was undoubtedly relatively low compared to the rest of the pack. Its spiritual essence was not particularly rich, probably only at the level of the 4th or 5th order Cloud River realm. It often suffered disadvantages in battles with other races. After carefully observing the wolf mutant in front of him, Lu Yi made up his mind. He chose to tattoo its mouth as the wolf mutant relied more on its teeth than its claws. Raising his hand, Lu Yi squeezed its wolf mouth shut and turned to Amber. Tell it that it might feel a bit of pain and to keep still. Amber immediately let out a growl. Disdain flashed in the wolf mutant's eyes, clearly not taking Amber's warning to heart. Once everything was prepared, Lu Yi's expression turned serious. Despite having tried it on his own body with many successful attempts, it was still just practice. Strictly speaking, this was his first real tattoo, so he definitely couldn't allow it to fail. The needle was placed right by his side. Lu Yi held the wolf's mouth firmly with one hand and swiftly took out a needle, dipped it in the material from the bottle, and quickly pricked into its skin at lightning speed. His concentration reached its peak at this moment. When the needle came down, his spiritual power surged slightly, and the first primary element was formed. Removing the needle, replacing it, dipping it in the material again and then piercing again. At the moment the second primary element formed, it perfectly merged with the first one. Lu Yi's movements were extremely fast but orderly. With the fall of each needle, a small arrowhead-shaped golden mark slowly took shape on the wolf's mouth. The composition of Glyph, Sharp Edge didn't involve a large number of yin-yang elements, only a few dozen. So Lu Yi was able to finish his work in less than a short 30 breaths. When the final needle came down and the final primary element was formed, the golden mark that had come into form emitted a faint light. The wolf mutant hadn't moved at all throughout the process. There wasn't even a flicker in its eyes. Obviously, the pain during the tattooing process meant nothing to it. Lu Yi let out a breath and released its maw. Carefully looking at it, it seemed that a golden tattoo had appeared on the wolf mutant's mouth, giving it a standout look. This was a visible tattoo and it was not permanent. It was of the same type as the Glyph, Wings tattoo that Lu Yi had initially obtained. Lu Yi's proficiency in the way of tattoos was not particularly high. Being able to achieve this level was already his limit. In the future, when his skills improved, he would be able to create hidden or permanent tattoos, but of course, those would require different materials. The wolf mutant eyed Lu Yi with suspicion since it didn't feel any particular change in itself. Activate your mutant powers and give it a try, Lu Yi said. The wolf mutant understood and immediately activated its spirit essence. In the next moment, the golden mark on its mouth shimmered, causing its sharp teeth to emit a faint glow, adding a sense of sharpness. It bared its teeth at Lu Yi, appearing quite imposing. Lu Yi slapped it aside and said, "Go play by yourself." Having become familiar with each other, there was no need for him to be courteous with it. With his first tattoo a perfect success, Lu Yi was in a good mood. Chapter 561 Coincidence. Inside the Arcane Glade, Lu Yi got up and once again approached the Divine Opportunity column. He connected his consciousness with the Vault of Providence, but this time he wasn't there to buy anything. Instead, he wanted to upgrade his inviolable saber. The Inviolable Saber was currently a middle-grade spirit artifact with 18 enchantments. It had been upgraded once a few months ago from low grade to middle grade. However, Lu Yi made rapid advancements recently in his cultivation. In less than 5 months since entering the Cloud River battlefield, he had reached the 4th Order Cloud River realm. Now he had enough qualifications to wield a higher-grade spirit artifact. Normally, cultivators in the Spirit Creek realm used low-grade spirit artifacts, which could be upgraded to middle grade upon arriving in the Cloud River realm. Around the 5th Order Cloud River realm, they could switch to high-grade spirit artifacts. As for the top-grade spirit artifacts, those were typically used by real Lake Realm cultivators, and beyond that were spell artifacts. Although Lu Ye's cultivation was 1 order below the 5th order, it wouldn't pose much of a problem. Since he had nothing else to do recently and didn't need to engage in any fights, he decided to take advantage of his free time to upgrade his Inviolable Saber so he wouldn't have to bother with it later. Inside the Vault of Providence, Lu Yi muttered softly under his breath, "Request Upgrade Spirit Artifact." He had done this in the past, so he was familiar with the process. As soon as the words left his mouth, his vision warped, and he appeared in a small and empty room with only a counter inside. So Lu Yi began his wait there. Even if he wanted to put in a request to have his spirit artifact upgraded, there also had to be a free artificer to take his request. Then the two of them could negotiate the price, set the specifications and time frame, and if no artificers accepted his request, then he would just continue to wait. For a cultivator from Jianghu, this was undoubtedly a convenient process. There was no need to spend any effort in hunting down an artificer himself. He could just do it through the Vault of Providence. And it was not limited to just upgrading spirit artifacts. He could commission a new one or even ask to have spirit pills and such refined. So, as long as one had skills in a specialized profession, earning contribution points wasn't actually that difficult. Cultivators specialized in refining and alchemy didn't even need to engage in battles. They could simply accept various commissions in the Vault of Providence and earn enough contribution points to meet their own cultivation needs. There were quite a few artificers taking on such commissions in the Vault of Providence. Lu Yi only had to wait a moment before the space in front of him distorted, and a figure appeared. When he looked up, Lu Yi saw a young woman who appeared to be in her 30s. Her skin was fair and she had a beautiful face. She was dressed in a fitted floral dress that accentuated her graceful curves. Lu Yi was surprised. During these types of transactions within the Vault of Providence, a natural disguise and protection mechanism was provided by the heavens that shrouded the identities and appearances of both parties. Each side was enveloped in a mist that made it impossible for both trading parties to discern each other's identities and even their genders. After all, the two parties involved in such transactions may come from different factions, so disguising their identities and appearances could reduce many unnecessary troubles. However, since Lu Yi received the gift of Providence, this disguise had lost its effect on him. He seemed to possess some useless privileges as he could see the artificer he was trading with clearly without any mist enveloping them. Lu Yi's surprise was at the fact that the artificer who came this time was the same woman as last time. This seemed far too coincidental. His Inviolable Saber had been upgraded from low grade to middle grade by her last time, and Lu Yi was quite satisfied with the result. Since it was her again this time, there shouldn't be any issues. Remaining calm, Lu Yi placed his Inviolable Saber on the counter in front of him. When the woman picked it up, she furrowed her brows. In a somewhat old voice, she expressed her dissatisfaction. Just a mere middle-grade spirit artifact. Last time it was just a mere low grade. Apparently, the grade of the spirit artifact was too low to offer her much of a profit. However, unlike last time, the woman didn't finish her sentence. Instead, she seemed to have discovered something as she turned the Inviolable Saber around and glanced at it, her expression slightly changing. The handle of the Inviolable Saber used to be inscribed with only one word, inviolable. But since the last upgrade by this woman, a feather symbol had been added. It didn't affect the functionality, and Lu Yi knew that some artificers liked to leave special marks on their works to prove that it was theirs. The feather symbol was undoubtedly the special mark left by this woman. Now she saw her own mark. Surprised, she looked up and glanced at Lu Yi, seemingly not expecting such a coincidence. The spirit artifact that she had once upgraded had appeared before her again. Thinking back, she recalled the event from a few months ago. After all, not many people were willing to pay a hefty price to upgrade a low-grade spirit artifact. Most cultivators would simply exchange them, which wouldn't cost that many contributions anyway. It's only been a few months, yet he needs another upgrade already? How is this guy cultivating so fast? The woman couldn't help but wonder to herself. Even though she couldn't see Lu Ye's face clearly, she had already inferred a few things from the inviolable in her hand. Upgraded to high grade? The woman asked in that aged voice. If one were to judge solely based on her voice, they would think she was an elderly person. In reality, however, she was a charming woman in her prime. Yes. What are your requirements? The shape and length remains the same, 27 enchantments, make sure it's sturdy enough and double the weight. All right. Name your price. Lu Yi pondered for a moment. The last time, it cost him 2,000 contribution points to upgrade the inviolable saber from low grade to middle grade. Now that he was upgrading from middle grade to high grade, it would surely cost more than before. After some consideration, he made his offer, 5,000 contribution points. The woman raised an eyebrow and a smile appeared on her lips. Clearly she was satisfied with the price, but mainly she did not expect that a young cultivator from the Cloud River realm like Lu Yi would be so generous. But rather than accept the offer, she said, "It'll be 8,000 contribution points at the very least. Upgrading from middle grade to high grade requires a significant amount of materials, all of which I'll have to purchase myself." Lu Yi watched her. If he didn't have the privilege bestowed upon him by the heavens that allowed him to see her expression, he would have thought she made a reasonable argument. However, now that he had seen the change in her emotions, it was not hard for Lu Yi to realize that he had offered too much at 5,000 contribution points. This woman seemed to be taking him for a fool. Upon careful consideration, Lu Yi understood that while he earned contribution points easily, any other cultivator from the Cloud River realm would have to think twice before spending thousands of contribution points. Forget it then. I don't have that many contribution points. While saying so, Lu Yi made to take back the inviolable. It's not like it's non-negotiable, the woman interrupted him in a hurry. 4,000 contribution points? What? The woman's brow twitched. I'm afraid I just realized 4,000 are all the contribution points I have left. You little brat, are you messing with me? Her expression sank. Final offer, 5,000 contribution points, you can retrieve your blade in 3 days. If you agree, then sign the sacred pact. Fine. Lu Yi answered with some reluctance. He made a mental note to himself that he would let others name their price the next time he decided to upgrade the inviolable, then he could gradually negotiate for a good price based on their reactions. The woman promptly brought out the sacred pact, listed down the terms, and after Lu Yi checked and confirmed them, both parties signed it. 3 days, the woman said before swiftly disappearing. Lu Yi lingered in the Vault of Providence for a while longer and chanced upon a few flames of earthen spirits out of stock previously and immediately purchased them with contribution points. It seemed that his earlier speculation was correct. The items in the Vault of Providence had a source. He had already bought all the flames of earthen spirits before, but a few more had appeared today. There was no doubt that someone was collecting them from somewhere and selling them to the Vault of Providence. It seemed that he would have to visit the vault from time to time in the future. Who knows, he might find something valuable. Now that there was a divine opportunity column in the Arcane Glade, it wouldn't take much effort to do so. After his consciousness left the Vault of Providence, Lu Yi turned around and his eyebrow was raised. A large group of wolf mutants were standing quietly behind him, their wolf eyes focused on him, with the tallest wolf, the pack leader, standing 10 meters in front of him. Though Lu Yi had become acquainted with some of the wolf mutants during this period, most of them ignored him, but that wasn't limited to just him. The wolf mutants never showed any signs of affection towards anyone other than Wuxia, especially the pack leader who was the most prideful of them. Usually, it wouldn't even spare a glance to Lu Yi and the others. However, it was waiting here today and it even brought the entire pack with it. Next to the pack leader was the wolf mutant that received the sharp-edge tattoo. It was undoubtedly an honor for it to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the pack leader, something which it didn't have the privilege of doing before. And it seemed to appear somewhat smug with traces of fresh blood still remaining at the corner of its mouth. It was clear that it had won a fight against its companions. Lu Yi immediately understood what was happening. You also want to have that special ability? The pack leader slightly lowered its head, and it was clear what it was trying to express. With just a simple sharp-edge glyph, a wolf mutant's bite could be enhanced by at least 30 to 40%. This improvement was naturally tempting to all the other wolf mutants. That was also the reason why the leader had brought the pack here to wait for Lu Yi. Lu Yi found this situation unexpected. He had originally planned to find a few other wolf mutants he was familiar with and continue practicing with them. Now he had saved himself a lot of trouble. They had come to him themselves, and the effect would naturally be different than if he had approached them himself. There were over 100 members in the wolf pack, and if Lu Yi could tattoo each wolf mutant, he could accumulate even more experience and insights, which he would be happy to have. After pondering for a moment, he took out the mutant core of a spirit beast from his storage sphere and presented it to the pack alpha. Trade for it with this. The wolf pack would go out hunting every few days, bringing back fresh meat and occasionally some mutant cores. However, the pack would consume the mutant cores themselves. Amber wasn't the only one who loved mutant cores. All spirit beasts enjoyed devouring the mutant cores of other spirit beasts as it accelerated their growth, especially when the mutant cores matched their own elemental affinity. The benefits they could gain were significant. While Lu Yi could provide the wolf mutants with tattoos for free, it would be even better if he could benefit from this opportunity. After all, he had spent contribution points to acquire the materials from the Vault of Providence, and it also took time and effort to tattoo the glyphs. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.